Check, check. 1, 2.
Check, check. 1, 2. I can hear myself, so that bodes well. I can hear myself out there, so that bodes well. Yeah. No, as in like it just, no, I know it's working. Tell me when.
Yeah, so you should be getting them if you're talking to the mic.
I want to make sure you get the right pronunciation, all right? So, Pelayo Menendez Fernandez from Espanol. All right, here we go. All right. Rich Ryan, I'll reach out. That's an easy one. Eugenio Bianchi, Italy. Alphonse Do Ruiz. All right, Do Ruiz. Dylan Scott. Bo Wills. James Kelly. Australia. Peter Schiller. Deutschland. Rylan Shadeg. Is it Shadeg? Shadeg. Yeah. Rylan Shadeg. Yep. From the USA. Graham Halliday. Good to see you again, brother. From the UK. Yep. Jonathan Wynn. Just John Wynn. John Wynn. Everybody wish John Wynn a happy Veterans Day, huh? Here we go. John Wynn, they got you from Australia. Okay. Tim Wenisch. Okay. Is it Wenisch or is it Venisch in German? Venisch. Ich habe 6 Jahre in Schule Deutsch gelernt, aber heute nicht so gut. Venisch? Venisch.
Yeah.
Venisch. Okay. David Magida. Welcome back.
Thanks, buddy.
Ryan Kent and Alexander Ronchevich.
A very warm welcome and welcome to Chicago. This weekend, a city full of sporting excellence, sandwiched between the NFL and NBA. The HYROX Elite 15 season is taking center stage right now in the Windy City on the banks of Lake Michigan. God, good start, eh? On the banks of Lake Michigan, we've got a new
Gather around HYROX Chicago. We are less than 2 minutes away. Less than 2 minutes away from
15
sending out our Elite 15.
I'm delighted
It's the men's
to have
Elite
alongside
15.
me Greg Williams, the oracle that is the Rocks life in the HYROX scene. Greg, excited about this one?
We really are. It's been 6 months since we saw the elite races at the World Championships, and the lineups that we've got today are absolutely stacked. There's a huge amount of talent in this field, a huge amount of people who have a real claim for the podium. So yeah, it's very exciting.
And we come into this with a brand new season structure, obviously kicking things off with the majors, then last chance qualifiers, and finally a bid to world champs. How many tickets are going to be taken here today?
There's 3 tickets up for grabs at the World Championships in Nice in June today. So the first 3 in the men's race and the first 3 in the women's race will claim their space at the World Championships.
And we know that the invites will roll down to 5th if we start getting multiples taking those tickets over the course of the 4 majors that we're going to see across the year. Now, what's the confirmed calendar?
So this is the first of 4 majors that we're having today in Chicago. Then in 3 weeks' time, we're going to be going to Stockholm. Then in February, we'll be going to Vienna. And then the final major is at the start of March in Washington, D.C.
And that all culminates in the big one, the World Championships in Nice on the 7th to 9th of June. Not just, of course, the elite season, but also the age groups as well. I mean, you were in Manchester. What are your main memories of the occasion that was?
It was, the atmosphere at the event was incredible. There was, so many athletes, so much talent there. I got to race with like a good friend of mine since childhood. So it was a very special memory, yeah.
As you can see down on the floor, our Elite 15 males are being welcomed. Dylan Scott there, an incredible athlete, second at last year's North American Championships, but we've not really seen the best of him yet. I wonder what he can do today. He had a little bit of illness earlier in the week, but he says he's fit and firing.
Yeah, Dylan really struggled at the World Championships in Manchester. Unclear really why that might have been, to be honest, because there wasn't an injury there. But jet lag may have played a part, but on home turf, he's a real contender for the podium.
You just saw Beau Wills run out there, and now Aussie James Kelly. He was a last-minute addition at Worlds in Manchester 6 months ago. Now he's had time to prepare. I wonder what we might see from that man who has moved his life to Germany. Oh, what about rookie Rylan Shadegg? Now, he picked up a ticket to this race at the last minute in Valencia, a 58:11 time. Could be a real wild card, Graham Halliday. Another wild card, Scott, but he's really proven his worth over his last year.
He really has. He's like the great UK hope. He's got one of the fastest times in the field, actually.
Jonathan Wynn there, 11th in the North American Champs last year, but don't let that fool you. This man is a real title contender, not just overall, but this race here today. Tim Vienisch, another absentee from last year's World Championships due to illness, but he's back in fighting form. This his first HYROX race back. And what about crowd favorite David Magida? He is the defending North American champion, and we know that he knows how to work this course.
Yeah, he struggled with injuries since really the end of last year, but on his day, he can really race.
Ryan Kent, another USA hopeful, one of the best the sport has seen. But coming in the #1 scene, Alexander Ronchevich. He, the second seed, he's a top seed in this race, the second seed overall in the absence of Hunter McIntyre. He has a real opportunity here to secure a world's bid early.
Yeah, Mr. Consistency in the sport. 4 podiums in 4 World Championships.
So much exciting building here in Chicago for this race, kicking off a season that's going to take us around the world. But of course, I know for these athletes, the main thing is to book a ticket early and be able to focus. And these are the athletes that we've got lining up, led by Alexander Ronchevich, Ryan Kent, David Magida there, Tim Vienisch, Jonathan Wynn coming in 5th. But also roll downs, perhaps athletes we're not quite as familiar with. Alphonse Deo and Eugenio Bianchi, Rich Ryan. We saw World Championships in Vegas a couple of years ago, but he's back on the Elite 15 stage. Oh, look at this matchup. Alexander Ronchevich versus Ryan Kent. Talk us through these two gentlemen.
Yeah, these have got to be two of the favourites for today. So there's Alexander Ronchevich, like I said, 4 podiums in 4 World Championships, a 56:13. That makes him the 3rd fastest man ever in the sport. And he's up against Ryan Kent, 56:52. I think that's the 5th fastest time in the sport. So these two are like so much talent, and they've both got so much confidence going into this race.
I was chatting to Ryan only yesterday, and he was saying how ready he is for this. But another great USA-European matchup between David Magida and Tim Vienisch. Kind of like the redemption tour for these two, both having really poor World Championships. Tim Vienisch there on the start line, wanting to open his account after devastatingly dropping out of Manchester only 6 months ago due to a hip injury. But he assures me he's feeling far better, although it's more of a management thing at this time. We did see him race, though, only in Munich.
So he has been struggling since Manchester with injury, but at the same time, he's set a new world record since coming back. He raced in the relay, the men's relay, relatively recently, and they absolutely smashed the world record. That adds to his list of world records, if you like, because he holds the men's doubles world record and the mixed doubles world record. So, yeah, he's certainly not completely unfit at this stage.
Yeah, 6th here last year at the North American Champs. There is always that discussion, isn't there, that the sleds play their part, especially for Europeans coming over. But do you think we're kind of past that now, to an extent that they know what they're up against and they're now training for it?
Yeah, they certainly not going into it unaware. Last year in Chicago, I think some of the athletes did struggle with the sleds, whether they pushed too hard and their race collapsed afterwards, or whether they just struggled with the sleds at the time. Like I say, they're not unaware going into this race.
This is the moment, isn't it? That tense wait. It's not just the elites that go through it, but anyone who races in the age groups and community racing. That's been happening all morning here on Navy Pier. There is normally a clock in the corner that is just counting down. And the MC is blaring, the music is going up. It's a really nervous wait. Do you know who doesn't look nervous? Dylan Scott. On the left of your screen there, super chilled, ready to go. Alex Ronchovich as well.
Alex, I saw in the gym yesterday and I said, "You feeling good?" He went, "Yes, always." So very confident, very
Standard Alex. The Americans there on the right of your screen. Megida will really want to assert himself. It's really interesting how they're going to take out of the gate, right? With no Hunter McIntyre to push the pace. It makes a real difference, like who's going to be like toying with the field, how fast are they going to go?
It really does. Hunter, when Hunter's in the race, he often leads from the front. He's very good on the skier, so the first station. So it'll be interesting to see who wants to take the lead in this one, who wants to take it on.
And we are seeing it nice and early. Tim Vinesh absolutely powering. What a motor. That man is really making an early impression. I mean, you've got these long straightaways, so it allows for a real acceleration of power. But just like that, the 2024 HYROX Major season is underway. And we're not going to be left short of excitement here, are we?
No, Tim's out the gates flying there, and like you alluded to there, it's a long straight. It's 1.75 laps per kilometre here, which is much less than some other HYROX venues. So it potentially does favour some of the good runners in the field, and Tim is one of the strongest runners here.
Yeah, he's into his third season. He understands how to manage a race, how important is having that ability.
Yeah, Tim is not inexperienced in this sport, so he's not going to make the mistake of going out too hot, I wouldn't imagine, but he certainly is taking it on here.
These opening laps in an Elite 15 are so important, just in terms of eskestablishing where the pack's going to land when you come into that skier. I was actually chatting to Graham Halliday earlier in the week, and he was telling me that normally skier being a really kind of strength of his, that he's not going to let himself get carried into the race and go too hard too soon.
No, you do have to be very, very careful on the skier. You can't win it there, but you can lose it there. And if there is that temptation to try and take the lead from the front, you can ruin your race early doors for the sake of a few seconds gain.
Yeah, we do apologise. A couple of the pictures are a little bit should we call it sketchy? Sketchy. Keeping up with these Elite 15 athletes is not the easiest job in the world for the camera. We'll hope to get that sorted for you as soon as possible as the athletes continue on this opening kilometre.
So a few stats for you on this opening run. I surveyed a lot of these athletes here in this field to understand their run times, where they might be at. Their average 5K time is 16.5 minutes for this men's field, and their 10K time is 34 minutes. So they're very, very quick, but they're also strong guys.
They really are. How important is it not to get carried away at this stage?
Very important. You can ruin your race very, very easily. Now, is this them coming into the skier? Yeah, they're coming into the skier here. So let's check what their split times were for that first kilometre.
Coming into the skier, your leading athlete is going to go to the far lane. There are no lane allocations here, so it's all about timing. And of course, Greg, the grid format.
Yeah, the grid format, and that can sometimes slow athletes down because there's a lot of turning on some of the stations. Like when we get to the lunges, when we get to the burpees, there's more turning than you might otherwise get. There's more of a race feel to it because you're always alongside the other athletes as well. Whatever station you're on, you're with them. So there is that race feel to it. And that's Ryland Shadegg there, who came in the lead from that first run. He ran that in just over 2 minutes, actually. Very, very quick.
Wow,
I
what
think
a
that
start.
first kilometre is well, I shouldn't say kilometre. I think it's a shorter first lap than a kilometre. But yeah, he's certainly gone out hot.
He came second last weekend at the Trifecta in Greece. There is a little bit of a question mark about what the impact of travel is going to be on him. He has been in Istanbul this week, he's been in Greece, and he's been in Switzerland, and now he's in Chicago. But this man has effectively come from nowhere, and people are talking about him.
Yeah, they really are. Like, both me and you have spoke to a lot of the elite guys in the past few days, and almost all of them have said Ryland's one to watch in this. He you know, like 6 months ago, last season, he was setting times that were good, but they weren't necessarily contending him for this elite lineup. And then relatively recently, he went to Valencia with only a few days' notice and ran a 58.11, significant improvement on his previous best time. So he's looking in very, very, very good shape.
As the guys work through these 1,000 meters on the ski erg. 1,000 meters, what kind of time does that take you, Greg?
in a HYROX, generally around 4:20 to 4:30 during a HYROX.
We're actually doing a challenge in my affiliate at the moment, 50 calories for time. And let me tell you, I've never been closer to death in my entire life. But it's not really about who comes off the ski erg first, because we are so early on in this race. Obviously, in between each functional fitness exercise, we're running a kilometer, but from the ski, we're going to head to the sled push, the sled pull, burpee broad jumps, rowing, farmer's carry, sandbag lunges, before closing out on the wall balls. This is a race. You need to strategize. You need to pace.
One point worth making is Ryland was first into that ski erg, and he happens to have the best ski erg time in the field as well. He's very good on this machine. His 2K time is around the 6:30 mark for this. 6:25, no, 6:30. Sorry, that is faster than anyone's 2K time in this field.
And he's already passed the 600-meter mark. That little graphic just giving us an indication of exactly where the field is lining up. What I find most interesting about him is that he's got a background in cycling. He is an XC mountain biker. That's where his kind of cardiovascular endurance is. And actually, he still includes a huge amount of that into his training. So rather than doing, like some of the athletes, these really big, long endurance running sessions, he's out on his bike, having a laugh.
Yeah, and he said to me he believes like a lot of these athletes have decided to specialise purely in HYROX, which can obviously make sense.
And we have our first athlete leaving the ski erg. Is Alex Ronkovic. Of course it is, coming in the #1 seed. The most consistent athlete the sport has seen, podiuming in the last 4 World Championships. I mean, he comes in very much, I would say, as favourite, but you've always got that question mark, haven't you, around the Americans being at home in front of a home crowd. But he's proving early that he could really hold this race.
Yeah, and Alex has no weaknesses, really. I can't look at a station and say Alex is going to fall behind a lot there. So if he does take an early lead and opens up a gap, then it could be very, very hard for anyone to catch him, because especially at the end of the race almost, he is very strong. He's got one of the best lunge times ever in the sport.
Yeah, and former swimmer, right? Ski erg, so up his street, strong back, lat, shoulder movement.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's easy pickings at this early stage. He's still in his warm-up.
Yeah, he is. And he said to me, like, the volume that he used to do in his swimming, like 80 kilometres a week, is far higher than he's needing to do in his running now. He has that huge base of aerobic base, so he doesn't tire too much in these races.
We've just had the initial order come through. Vienisch out of Germany is still leading. Ronkovic actually in second, and look at third, Bianchi. But we know he's a runner. We know that he's like kind of largely been, I guess, under the radar coming in on roll down. But this is a guy that has a huge background in sport and OCR racing. So the running side of this, not a problem.
No, the running side's not a problem for him. Where we may get to a problem is in these next 2 stations. He's not the strongest athlete in the field physically, so the sleds are probably where he struggles more than some of the others. So he may drop off there. If he gets through there and he's in 3rd spot, then he's looking in very good shape.
I say it's literally awesome. Kind of love that, mixing up the Elite 15s already. Like, we can get very set in our ways with the athletes that we're seeing, and what this roll down system allows is for us to see new people. It kind of just makes it more exciting. People who are challenging the status quo, and people from all around the world.
Yeah, love it. And some of these guys are in on a roll down because other people haven't accepted their place. But historically, we've seen that people on a roll down can do very well in the sport. Like in Las Vegas in 2002 at the World Championships, Chris Glasky was there on a roll down and she won it. And Rich Ryan, who we're seeing compete here today, he was on a roll down and he finished 7th that year. James Kelly, who got literally a last-minute call-up to the World Championships elite race in Manchester, finished 8th last time. So just because they're on a roll down, just because they're late call-ups, that doesn't mean that they're not in contention on the day.
So I met Rich Ryan for the very first time this week. Awesome guy. Also listened to his podcast. They were doing a fantasy draft for the HYROX opening major here in Chicago. Guess where he drafted himself?
He doesn't lack confidence, Rich. I'm guessing in the top 3.
No, it wasn't top 3. He wasn't that bad. He was like, but he did make me laugh. He drafted himself at 5th, and he said like, "But what if I didn't?" And it paid off. I would have been gutted. I was like, you know what, fair play, mate. But obviously him and Ryan Kent are working closely together with Megan Jacoby over on the women's side, and they have just kind of launched this new business in RMR. It's lovely that within this community of HYROX racers, people are finding, not just friendships, but they're finding like business ventures. They're finding kind of ways to make money so they can literally live within this ecosystem, which is epic.
Yeah, and we'll see it more and more and more. The sport is growing at a huge rate, opening up in new countries all the time. It's really expanding into Asia. We've had races in Australia recently. So, yeah, there are going to be businesses like that, coaching businesses, supplement businesses set up off the back of it.
And we are at the sleds. What would you say? Is that moving faster than normal?
That looks like it's moving very well. Now, typically, you would see an athlete trying to conserve their legs by braking halfway in the lane. If they're not needing to do that, then you can see that they're feeling very good. Now, they may still do it even if they are feeling good, just to save their legs for the rest of the race. But that sled there looks like it's moving well, certainly. And the indications are from like the age group athletes that have been competing today is the sleds that are going pretty well.
We've got Ryan Kent there on the right-hand side of your screen, but first into it was Rylan Shadegg. They're both strong athletes. Kent in particular has got a great reputation on the sled push and pull. It's a very comfortable implement for him. He is probably on the bigger side when it comes to kind of like the muscle weight that these athletes carry. And he is well used to the American way.
Oh, yeah. He's had to push the American sleds, for most of his HYROX career. He won't get caught out by them, certainly. I think Ryan Kent has been caught out previously by trying to push too hard on these sleds, and I think he's accepted that he doesn't need to lead from the early stages of the race. He trusts himself now, so.
One of the most interesting things I am speaking to Ryan earlier was that his main focus this year has been training the back half of the race, which I think is something that's always kind of caught him out in years gone by. So I think we will truly start to see whether he is capable and what he intends to do in this race, kind of once we get past the Burpee broad jumps. Yeah,
and he's actually strong on the next station. The sled pull is one of his strongest stations as well. So, yeah, the back half of the race is obviously worth working on, but he can catch up very soon.
So your top two, Alexander Ronkovic and Rylan Shadegg. Looks like they're first off the sleds. And back out onto that 1 kilometer run. It's an interesting course here in Chicago because, well, especially to a lot of the European races, this run length is so long. We're running 1.9 laps. So you've got these massive straightaways that we've already referenced at the top of the show. But does it suit the runners more so? You get the opportunity to really build speed and sort your pace out.
Yeah, I think you do. If you compare this track, for example, to what we had in Manchester for the elite race, where they had to do 4 laps per kilometre, it's such a significant difference. The runners can really open their legs on those long straights. Conversely, those 4 laps in Manchester was some kind of a leveler, really. I think the non-runners would have appreciated those.
I've got a question for you. Have you ever seen Eugenio Bianchi without a hat?
No, and I get so hot competing in HYROX. I don't know how anyone can wear a hat. I would do it naked if I could. And there's an image for you at home.
As you can see, the field is starting to spread a little bit now as we kind of get into the meaty part of this, one would hope, around an hour-long race.
There's a lot of talk in HYROX of compromise running. So, you know, running on fresh legs differs vastly to running compromise when you've done the skiing, pushed the sled and done the lunges. This is where the compromise nature of the race really starts coming out of that sled push, trying to run. You get a real idea of if you've pushed too hard, how hard those sleds were on you, how good you're feeling. This is the early signs of how you might be feeling for this race.
Yeah, we were actually having a brief conversation this week with Chris Hinshaw about that, a subject matter expert in aerobic capacity. He's got a background in Ironman and in CrossFit, and he's coming into the sport. And this just seems to be something that's so in his wheelhouse, and hopefully we'll have him on the live stream a little bit later on to kind of tell us, you know, how do you best maximize your ability to compromise run, because it's such a big part of being successful in this format.
Yeah, it really is. Now, part of being able to run compromised is having strength in the legs, and I referenced earlier there the average 5k and 10k run times. I also surveyed this field on their squat strength, their 3-rep max squat. So for the men, it's around 122 kilograms or 270 pound average. So not necessarily crazy strong. They're strong guys, but not crazy strong. They're very good runners that can maintain a good level of strength.
Sled pull for the men, 153 kilos, 50 meters of it. And one man we haven't mentioned, and I don't think we've really seen a great deal of, is Peter Schiller. He actually holds some of the top splits in Hanover and Munich last year on the sled pull. So when you have something like that, right, like an implement that you are good at, how do you balance, in your experience as an athlete, the need to kind of go hard because you know you're good, but not overcook yourself when you know you're maybe not as good as the run?
HYROX is very much about toeing that line. You want to push as hard as you can without completely ruining the race. And to a certain extent, you're holding back on almost every element of the race. Even the lunges, like the second from last station, you can't push as hard as you physically want to because you need to run afterwards and you need to do the wall balls. And even if you're not going to do the wall balls unbroken, you can't do them as hard as you want to because you need to finish the 100 reps. So it really is about toeing that line in the race.
As you can see, the athletes coming back into the rock zone. Number 3, the sled pull. Ronkovic, Rylan Shadegg. A real battle happening on our hands. With the sleds, they have to run to the far side of the grid before they get going. That's something that they didn't have to do prior. All of the running has to happen down those Burpee broad jump marker lanes to keep the lanes free for the judging and the sled work. They are working through the sled pull. Another real separator. We always discuss sleds, don't we? But actually one thing that is great about this new format is very much that you can now earn your ticket to World Championships at a singular race, competing against the same people. No longer is it based on time around the world. It's been a real leveler and something that I really like about this new format.
Okay, so it looks like Ryan Kent is leading. Ronkovic is in 3rd, but we think Tim Venish is out of the race. So maybe that old injury has come back to haunt you, unfortunately.
Oh, poor Tim Venish. Honestly, that man has absolutely no luck. We were talking online earlier in the week, and he said that basically his hip has, to an extent, kind of fused slightly into the socket, and it makes it really hard for him to train and to obviously under the compromised run, for him to kind of maintain a fluency and find a pace. I mean, there's no guarantee that that's what it is, but, you know, he's been trying to work through that for a really long time.
He has. He'll be absolutely gutted because he's worked on that through the summer, and he must have been really encouraged by coming back and doing the relay, setting the world record. Must have been feeling good. So for that to come undone to a certain extent so early in this race, he's going to be absolutely devastated.
Yeah, it really opens up, though, the opportunities for Ryan Kent, Rylan Shadegg, and Alexander Ronkovic to take those top 3 spots potentially.
And that's Ryan Kent, I think, leaving the sled pool. He's looking very strong. We knew, like I said earlier, Ryan is very, very strong on the sled pool. And he's opened up quite a significant gap here, and that's Alex Ronkovic following him out now, maybe 10 seconds behind there. Rylan Shadegg looks like he's going to be leaving in 3rd place.
Ryan Kent as well has given up his job as a UPS, and he is now a full-time dad and training athlete. Now, can you imagine the confidence that must give you, Greg, to be able to dedicate your entire life to training and also your, young child?
Yeah, I heard him saying, like, this is the first time in his HYROX career, which has been very successful, that he's been able to dedicate really to training. It feels like he's more like a full-time athlete now, and is benefiting from that. He raced quite early in this season. I think it was early September, he raced in Dubai and set a 59-minute time without really like training a huge amount or trying to peak for that race. He's done some training runs that were very similar to that time in recent weeks, and he said he's far beyond that. So he thinks he's at least in far better shape than the 59 minutes that he set in Dubai.
And he's had a 10-week block building up to this race alone. You know, he said that he's like a athlete that really kind of drives off confidence, and normally he can get really nervous because he feels he hasn't done enough. And now he's training full time. He's had a 10-week block specifically on Chicago, specifically for a major, with a field that he probably could largely guess. And look at him go.
Yeah, and he's looking incredibly strong. We know he's got like a good engine on him as well. So to be opening up and lead, it's not like there's an obvious place in the race where he's going to get caught like easily. But then that said, he's being followed by Alex, who has absolutely no weaknesses either. So this is really lining up to be a great race.
It's the second half, isn't it? It's all going to come down to the second half, because traditionally that is where he has had problems. So how has this kind of new lifestyle, how is it going to help him in that second half to hold off someone like Ronkovic, who we know is pretty consistent throughout the entire race? But actually, we haven't really seen Ronkovic race since Manchester. This will be his first Elite 15 back, and that comes with its own set of challenges, just to the extent of having not paced yourself in an elite environment just yet.
Yeah, and even just like the feeling of running a HYROX is hard to replicate in training. Like to push yourself to the limits that a HYROX race demands, certainly the elite races demand. That feeling, like I say, is hard to replicate. It's been 6 months since those races. Even though he's a very experienced athlete, we'll find out, what his off-season has been like. Has he been trying to peak for this race? He knows he's auto-qualified for the other majors, so maybe he's even treating this almost as a training run and going to try and peak for another major. But obviously, he's looking very strong so far.
A training run, and he called it a little bit of redemption. Take me back to the North American Championships last year.
So the North American Championships last year, a very interesting race. There was a lot of athletes caught out, like we said, by the sled. Some didn't pace it very well. Some went out too hot and then got caught. Megida and Dylan ran very, very good races. Megida was probably the race of his life, really. He paced it to perfection. His running looked so strong. And it was, him and Dylan really, controlling the race by the end of it. But yeah, there's a lot of athletes there, a lot of talented athletes there who didn't do so well, who despite their experience, ruined their race at some point. So yeah, they'll be looking for some redemption today.
That was Jonathan Wynn on the right of your screen, just entering the workout station. And onto, in my experienced jokes opinion, the worst section possible, the burpee broad jumps. When you think you're kind of trying to manage your cardiovascular output and your heart rate on the runs, and then you come into this and you're trying to do it at speed, the compression of your chest when you're going up and down, the explosiveness of the jumping, it really is a whole new challenge. The runners, as you can imagine, obviously find this a slightly simpler station to the sleds, and this is why this can be somewhat of a turning point. Ryan Kent told me earlier this week that this is where he plans to take the lead. It's all about the burpee broad jumps, and as we've mentioned plenty of times before, he's really confident now about the second half of this race, but his strategy was that this is going to be the turning point.
This is a station as well where ideally it's easier said than done, but you just want to try and be consistent here. Just pace yourself very well. It's not like you want to do 5 really quick ones, then lie on the floor for 10 seconds and then do another 5. You want to try and be consistent, and that's what these guys look like they're doing, and they're just chipping away at this, chipping away. Now this is really the first time as well where the grid comes into play, and the grid can be different from a normal race because there's more turns here. So you get to the end of the lane and there's that temptation as you turn to just stand there and have a little break, and that can eat a few seconds into your race where it might otherwise not do. Now these guys are experienced, they'll know that, but there is still that temptation because this station in particular can jack your heart rate sky high.
I speak from experience. You're 1, 2, and 3 so far. Ryan Kent, Rylan Shadegg, and Alexander Ronchevich. I mean, I say they're making light work. That's probably not quite the word, is it? But they're certainly working smoothly through this burpee broad jump section. 2 Americans, and then the European we expected to see somewhere in the conversation for a World Champs ticket. But Ryan Kent is the first off. Shadegg with maybe a couple more meters to go before he can join him. Shadegg, obviously a very experienced runner. You saw him check his watch there just on timings before he set off on the next kilometer. Seems that we're going to have a real battle for third, potentially, between Shadegg and Ronchevich. Ryan Kent, though, creating a bit of a buffer for himself.
Yeah, let's see how these guys are running now, because like I just said, this is really where your heart rate jacks up high after coming out and then burpee broad jumps, and this is where running can really start to hurt. You're feeling very, very compromised. It will be interesting to see like the split times coming out on this run, and you get a really good idea of how these guys are feeling at this point.
So we just had a big dog enter the building. Chris Hinshaw has stood over my right-hand shoulder, watching on. Chris, jump in. Come and have a chat with me. If you've not come across Chris Hinshaw, he is our subject matter expert in aerobic capacity. He's had a huge career already in the Ironman space initially before moving into CrossFit, and now we are lucky enough to have you with us here in the HYROX scene. How has your experience been so far?
This is just truly remarkable. I mean, the level of competition that's happening on the floor right now, it's remarkable. These are truly talented athletes.
What's your biggest takeaway being a little bit newer to the sport and watching these kind of scenes unfold?
What I'm impressed by is the balance between the athletes. I mean, obviously there's a lot of running within the HYROX space, but then you also must have a substantial amount of strength. The key for success, though, is to have a good equal share of balance, and that's what we're seeing at the highest level.
Now, we always talk about the burpee broad jump station as, you know, off the back of a compromised run into something like this, which is jacking your heart rate, and then you're back into a compromised run. Like, when you are training athletes in this kind of situation, what's the main kind of advice you can give to kind of keep their performances to a certain level?
Yeah, you pointed it out. This burpee broad jump is without a doubt one of the most difficult pieces within the competition. The key will be for these athletes when they get out of that burpee broad jump to settle back into the run. But the question is, it's like, how do you do that? The key, what you must remember, is your stride length will be compromised coming out of that jump. So how do you then work on your stride? you focus on cadence first. And as you said earlier, cadence, you gradually lengthen your stride. Soon, your breathing will be to match, and now you're back running.
How do you do that in training when you're not in that race environment?
Well, that's the problem is that you have to mimic the actual environment in the race in your training, and that's what's called specific training. You must practice the run into the obstacles as well as the obstacle into the run, and then of course the combination of run obstacle into the run.
How much of the experience that you gain from your other sports are you applying when you are watching the athletes do this compromised running?
So what I'm always looking for is I am looking for the athletes when they're actually running. I'm looking at their level of fatigue, but the problem is like, how do you do that through observation? The one area that we see over and over again is the shrugging of the shoulders. That is a death sentence. You know, when an athlete begins to shrug the shoulders, it is going to compromise the length of their stride. As soon as they compromise that length of stride, they begin underperforming, and now doubt settles into their mind. You can never let doubt, negative thought propagate.
Pelio Fernandez there, not actually showing any side of those shrugging shoulders. It's amazing how they manage to maintain kind of the level and the speed that they do. When they're running splits, quite often it's pretty consistent. How much training goes into that ability?
This is what is truly remarkable for me, is that like they're halfway through right now, but the damage that was created from the push and the pull of the sleds and then the burpee broad jumps, I mean, the fact that those movements come so early, and you know what, by the time you get done with them, you're now just halfway. To me, that takes a lot of mental and emotional resilience, that you have to be mentally tough in this competition to just survive. My feeling, though, is that once these athletes get to the row, there's the opportunity for them to collect themselves, to regroup. I'll tell you what's interesting for me is that when they look at the run, one of the slower runs is right after the burpee broad jump. The key will be that run that follows the next one. That typically is faster for everybody. If it's not, that's a sign that you've actually pushed too hard too soon.
So that's really interesting, because my run after the burpee broad jumps is useless because I am broken. We're onto the row. Ryan Kent looks to be establishing a pretty significant lead, but Rylan Shadegg has not left his side. You speak about that transition to the row with the ability to collect themselves, but quite often this is the point in the race for these athletes where they're at their most broken. Do you work on the mental side of this kind of sport, and you know, how should the athletes be kind of talking to themselves in this moment?
So here's the key. If you're shorter and lighter, you are at a significant disadvantage within the row. If you are a taller, bigger, heavier athlete, you have a massive advantage. That bigger, taller athlete has a disadvantage when they run. So when they get to the row, this is where they must make a move. As much as they're not going to want to, these bigger, taller athletes, the heavier athletes, they must push this row against all of their urges to keep it slow, to keep it steady, because the upcoming run for them is where the challenge will be. In my opinion, the striking distance for the true runner in this sport, if they're slightly behind, is the run coming after this next row.
We have heard, despite our cameras not showing it, that Tim Vienisch is very much in the race, currently sat in fourth. Sorry for that pretty outrageous misinformation. Tim's dad and mum, if you are watching, hold my hands up, apologize. Tim's fine, he's doing great. He's currently in fourth. And we talk about dampener settings, right? When the athletes get to the row, they're allowed to move that dampener one time before they start their first pull. So under this fatigue, kind of how do you work out what that dampener should be?
So for me, in this type of a time domain, this on the rower, I'm going to be looking at my stroke rate. I'm going to set my damper much, much lower. My damper will probably be closer to a 3 or a 4, but then if you're a power-based athlete, a strong athlete, you're going to put that damper up significantly higher, which is going to force their stroke rate to be much, much lower. So really, you have to know the type of athlete you are. Are you a speed, strength, power type of an athlete, which is really, really favoring you on that row? Or are you more of an endurance, a muscular stamina-based athlete where time is on your side?
How do you think, Chris, about the rowing technique? So if it was a pure rowing competition here, you know, you'd be telling someone to use their legs predominantly for rowing, but these guys have got to go and do lunges and wobbles and run afterwards. How do you think about that in the context of a HYROX?
That is a great question. So when I'm actually watching these athletes row, one of the things that I'm looking for is their technique. Are they really mentally in the game? So the thing that I look for is the catch. So when they're leaning forward and then they begin to pull back, is there slack in the line? Is there slack on the chain? Or are they actually looping through that movement to keep the tension on the chain? When the mind fails, what we do see is a drop in technique. They begin to make sacrifice because they're no longer thinking as clear as they were on a training day. So that's what I look for, is a degradation in technique because of fatigue. And that's the first sign of trouble.
Rich Ryan there, Peleo Fernandez. Alex Ronkovic is now out on track as well, but that is behind Rylan Shadegg and, of course, Ryan Kent, who's currently in the lead. Now, you said this is the most important run. What should they be thinking? What should they be doing?
The number one piece of advice that I would do is I would keep my shoulders nice and relaxed. What we're looking for is that nice V shape coming off of the neck and extending out to the tips of the shoulders. So if you need to, shake those arms, get those arms nice and relaxed. You want to know why? Because they're going to have to use that grip coming up. So the key will be for them to make sure that during this run, they shake out all that tension in their forearms. The key, though, if I was out there on the floor and I'm watching an athlete, what I'm looking for is the rate of breath. Are they in control of their breathing, or are they hyperventilating? Is their demand for oxygen exceeding what they can supply? The key will be is just get to that point where they're at a sustainable pace, but touching the edge of the envelope of that death zone intensity.
I'm not sure it's something that we speak about quite enough, but the transition strategy. So not just on and off the rower, but in and out of the rock zone. This rock zone is quite interesting because it's not maybe the length that we'll see in other venues. But to what extent should they be thinking about that to potentially eke back very precious seconds?
Wow, that's really, really intuitive on your part. Very smart. So when you're coming into that transition zone, the very first thing that you must do is try your best to recover. Take those deep, slow breaths and then settle yourself. But the key for you is always get your brain thinking about what is the very first thing that I must do when I get into that obstacle. You've got to keep the brain engaged. The brain does not want to stay engaged when you fatigue.
And Ryan Kent is comfortably leading here in Chicago. Chris, what do you make of that?
I mean, he looks terrific. I mean, look at the speed in which he is moving. And he's a taller person. He's a bigger boy. And the fact is that this guy has settled into a pace that clearly he is comfortable.
That is what is so interesting about Ryan, is that actually he was never truly considered a runner athlete. This is a guy that's really had to work on this. I mean, just in your experience, like, how much does it take to become a better runner?
That's just like everything. It just takes time. The truth is that he is able to transition from one of those obstacles into the run faster, more efficiently than anybody else. He's able to find his cadence, his speed, his breathing rhythm much faster. That doesn't just come from God's gift. That takes talent. That takes time. He has put in the work, and that's what I notice.
Serious athlete is Kent. Greg, I feel like we've been ignoring you. I'm so sorry. We're all friends. We've been having a nice chat.
That's fine. I'm very much a data guy, Chris, and I think you are too. We get a huge amount of data out of these races. Is there anything that you think you would particularly look for in someone's race data to help them improve for future races? Is it where their running deteriorates or anything like that, or anything else that you might look for?
Great question. HYROX does something that better than any other sport that I've ever come across. The information that they give that participant is immense. I mean, it's truly remarkable. The fact for me, what I would really take a look at is in the balance between the run and everything else. What you notice, which is interesting about HYROX, is that typically across the board between men and women, the run represents 50% of the total time. Is that how your result shows? That's the first thing that I would look at. Do you need to spend more time with your obstacles? The key in the obstacles, though, is which movement for you took the greatest amount of time. So if you're looking at re-entering and going after it again and setting another personal best, then you've got to attack the highest value of opportunity, which represents the longest duration. For most people, what we see is it occurs in the wall ball, which is interesting to me. Why is the sprint, the finishing kick, the most challenging portion for them? Mainly, I believe, because they underestimate the difficulty. When they get there and they do that first one, they're like, woof, that thing is rough.
Right, we are on to the farmer's carry, 2 times 32 kilogram kettlebells, and already you can see that Ryan Kent is operating at a much faster cadence than his next nearest in Rylan Shadegg. I mean, he is much a strength athlete. It doesn't appear to be causing him too much issue. Greg, we spoke about this. These guys need to go unbroken here.
They do, and again, this is one of those stations where the grid comes into play. Normally, in a normal HYROX event, you might have nice 50-meter lengths, 75-meter lengths, even 100-meter lengths to do for these farmers carries. These guys are doing 20 meters. They're having to turn each time. That takes energy, that takes time. It really does add seconds, and your grip is going all the time. So the grid is like, the farmers carry is where the grid makes this most difficult.
Chris, cadence on something like this, is that something that you can find, or is it something you're battling through as Ryan Kent is already done and dusted? That is remarkable. But yeah, the cadence on something like this, you can see there's a real variety. How do you find what's right without blowing up?
When you're doing these farmers carries, you have to realize that you cannot maintain your normal stride length. So then how are you going to go fast? And you're right, Lauren, you said it correctly. It's about your cadence, but you have to practice this. And one of the things you must realize is that when you practice cadence, that also takes time because you've never done it before. It's not like matching up your running cadence. These guys are trying to do somewhere around 240, maybe 260 steps per minute. These athletes are running at around 180 steps per minute. So it's dramatically faster.
And at this stage of the race, everything is starting to hurt. Let's take a little look at the graphics on your left-hand side. Your 1 and 2 is Kent and Shadegg. 20 seconds separating them. That's no time at all, especially when you consider what's to come. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure having you.
Yep, thank you, Lauren. Appreciate it too.
We'll see you for the women's race, and perhaps we can have a quick chat a little bit more about what you're doing in the HYROX space. Looking forward to that. But Greg, it's been an interesting couple of minutes.
It has. We've been struggling to get some splits throughout this race, but we're seeing some now. So Ryan Kent is leading as he comes out of the farmers carry. Rylan Shadegg is 20 seconds behind him, and then Ronchevich is 30 seconds behind Rylan Shadegg. So it's a very, very close race at this stage. It looks like these three are opening up a gap against the rest of the field.
I mean, I know we said that he was a bit of a wild card, Rylan Shadegg. But what about our man in fourth, Pelio Fernandev? I mean, he was a wild, late, roll down, who happened to live in Chicago.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he lives in Chicago. Wasn't called up to the race until, I think, yesterday, Thursday. He's doing incredibly well. I think he was ranked 30th in the elite rankings. So to be fourth at this stage of the race, and I should add as well, having got through the sleds, he's an endurance athlete really. I think a year ago he was competing in the Ironman World Championships. I think he weighed like 149 pounds at the time. He's added weight to himself since then. In his first HYROX, or his first pro weight HYROX, he really struggled on the sled pull, but he's obviously significantly improved on that ever since. But strength isn't his strength, and so to be in contention at the late stage of this race is going to be really encouraging for him.
He won HYROX New York City, a 59.57. So he's got a bit of a pedigree there if he can keep that kind of momentum going. And we met his wife earlier today, didn't we? She's on the judging team. This is very much a family affair. Rich Ryan in fifth, just as he predicted. Go on, Rich Ryan. No, that makes me laugh because if he can hold that out, he has won a serious amount of points in his Fantasy HYROX League, and I am happy for him in doing so. But what's more important about top 5, Greg, is that potentially not in this race, but going forward, when World Champion places start to roll down, they only roll down to 5. So from Stockholm onwards, 4th and 5th suddenly become really important.
Yeah, they do. They really do, and they also potentially auto-qualify you for the remaining majors of the season. So the top 3 today are going to qualify themselves for the World Championships, but it's depending on who that is. It's potentially that the top 5 will auto-qualify themselves for the remaining majors.
And we are in to your sandbag lunges, 100 meters of 30 kilograms over your shoulders.
This is a really interesting part of the race because this is where Rončević in particular is very strong. If he's going to claw back some time here, he could do it at this station. So if Kent and Shadegg come out of this with a significant lead, then they're going to be very, very encouraged.
Just looking at the pictures right now, you can see that Shadegg has really eaten in to that 20 seconds that was separating him and Kent. Look at the speed in which he's attacking these lunges as well. That is a man on a mission. He is an endurance athlete. I'm not saying that Kent isn't, but his background in cross-country cycling means that in terms of building through races, this is something that he's exceptionally capable of, race strategy, something he's been doing since a really young age. He spent 3 years with a pro card in cross-country mountain bike racing. He's raced against the GOAT. I appreciate this will be a very niche thing to say, but he's raced against Nino Schurter, the best mountain bike racer of all time, and he came through with Christopher Blevins, who's a World Cup winner. Like, he was very, very good. Oh, the grind continues. Kent steps in front of Shadegg. Look at that body language, Greg. What's that saying to you?
The thighs can be really burning at this stage. And a sign to look for of how fatigued they are is how quickly they're stepping through. Now, sometimes at the start when they're feeling really good, they just automatically step through without having that toe tap in the middle. A sign of how fatigued they are is how long that toe tap lasts for. You know, is it pretty much straight through, or are they having a little pause each time? And then again, going back to the grid format, are they using that turn as an opportunity to save themselves or like rest for a few seconds, or are they really getting on their way straight away?
I do wonder, obviously, you know, it is a race, so you're wanting to catch up with the people ahead of you, but is there more pressure on Shadegg during the lunges, because his warbles prior to Valencia, maybe 3 weeks before, he was able to start doing them again, so he hasn't had quite the volume of training on warbles as he might have liked, making this portion of the race all the more important.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and you know, Kent's obviously experienced with the warbles. Alex, depending on how far he is behind when they get to that stage, he's like one of the strongest wallballers in the field. So if he isn't feeling completely confident in that station, then he's going to want to be like doing as well and getting there as soon as possible to open up a lead or like close the gap as much as possible on those two.
One thing we don't have but really would love is the time. It's been an interesting day here in commentary with but we are starting to get the splits through, which is great. As the racers start to complete on their sandbag lunges and we get to the big exciting finish, of which we have had many in the past at the warbles. What's your kind of favorite / worst warble moment?
My worst warble moment is one of my most recent races myself, when the ball was just so sweaty it was hard to catch, and that makes it so much more difficult than, you know, if you were just doing it completely fresh in the gym. Just a 5-second gap between the first two leaving the sandbag lunges, and then I think that's Alex just leaving there. So it looked like Ryan Kent was leading. Just 5 seconds separates those top two. So Rylan Shadegg just 5 seconds behind, and then Alex looks like he's left. We'll try and get the split on that one, but he's very, very close as we enter the last stages of this race.
I know time flies when we're having fun, but it feels like we're well under the times that they recorded last year. They are flying. I mean, I know there was a little bit of talk this evening, yesterday evening and earlier today, about new carpet under the sleds, but perhaps that's made all the difference. Just the speed in those two blocks really pulling down times. But actually what that really means is overall, people's averages coming right down. Great news.
Yeah, if the sleds were feeling slightly easier, you don't just look for signs of that in the sled push times, because if they are slightly easier, then the impact that has on you for the rest of the race, it compounds. If you're feeling much better for the rest of the race, then the sled pull becomes easier, the broad jump becomes easier, the running becomes easier. So if it hasn't taken quite so much out of them as, maybe it did this time last year in Chicago, then it has a huge impact on the rest of the race.
Your current 1, 2, and 3, Kent, Shadegg, and Ronchevich. But this is where it all starts to matter. We're going into a heavy leg exercise, 100 wall balls with a 9-kilogram wall ball and a 3-meter target for the men. You're coming off the lunges, your lower body is shot, and now you're about to do 100 squats past parallel, as well as blowing out your shoulders, Greg. It's not for the faint-hearted. I was speaking to the girls, actually, throughout the week building up to this race, and it was actually, I think, Maria Fessick who told me, but along the lines of, not everyone nowadays can do unbroken wall balls, but this is where the sport is going, and actually, if you want to be a real contender in a year or two's time, that is going to be what has to be done.
Yeah, you're right. The unbroken wall balls has become almost the standard for some of the top ladies in the field, but we don't really see it very often at all on the men's side. Now, I think Alex Ronchevich did it in Manchester, but he was one of the first to do it, in the elite field. But I think over time, as the standard improves, as the sport evolves, I think unbroken wall balls is going to be, the standard for these elite guys in both the men's and the women's field.
It's worth remembering as well, all of these athletes, whilst some of them are finding a way, we alluded to it briefly earlier, to become pro athletes full time, Ryan Kent has hit the wall balls, ladies and gentlemen. Behind that 3 sled pull balloon is the man, the myth, the legend. But alluding to the fact, back to my original conversation, alluding to the fact that a lot of them have full-time jobs, and Alexander Ronchevich is one of them. He quit his second job as a swim coach to allow more time to train, but, he's a full-time teacher. So he's managing a huge training schedule, having all of the success over such a prolonged period of time, and he's doing it all whilst working. It's kind of fabulous. But ultimately, if the sport gains enough traction, hopefully he won't have to do that for too much longer.
Yeah, these guys have to put in hours and hours of training to be at the level they're at. It's not easy at all. So to manage it around work commitments is very difficult. Now I'm getting word that these guys are just 5 seconds apart.
This is going to be an utterly amazing finish. Ryan Kent and Rylan Shadegg on the wall balls, 5 seconds separating them. They are neck and neck, side by side, the two American men going rep for rep. So we know they're probably going to break. Who's going to hold on the longest?
This is incredible. This is one thing that maybe we've not seen too much in this sport so far. Two guys coming in for the win, neck and neck, just seconds apart. They're next to each other. They know how quick each other are going. They're waiting for the other one to break, but no one's showing any weakness so far. They're looking strong. They're just popping those wall balls up. This is where maybe no reps can come into play as well. Even if you just do 1 or 2 no reps, that can let the other guy in. That can let the other guy take the lead.
You can see the judges' eagle eyes making sure they hit depth. Oh, do you see the knees of Rylan Shadegg coming in? That's normally a little bit of an indicator that things are getting a little bit tasty out there in his lower body. Oh, and he's broken. Oh, look at me knowing my fitness. No, I know wall balls because I love them. But this is exactly what Ryan Kent said he's been working on as he breaks the latter half of the race. And it is paying dividends.
Yeah, that break would have really encouraged Ryan Kent, but then he's broken straight after. But those breaks, it's very, very tempting when you have a break to let it last 5, 10, 15 seconds. Those guys, because they're next to each other, because they know how close this is, that break was only for a few seconds. Plus, remember, these two will know that Ronkovic is very, very strong here. They know that he potentially could go unbroken.
Have you seen Ronkovic break? I have not. He means business. He's closing the gap on the leading 2 Americans. If you're wondering why the decibels have gone right up, it's because we are way too excited about this finish, and we are out in the middle of everything, watching these guys go tooth and nail through their 100 wall balls. Who is going to be the first 3 to claim their ticket? It looks like Kent, Shadegg and Ronkovic, but only the winner gets an all-access pass to the 2024 majors, 2025 majors as well. This is a huge opportunity. Ryan Kent has got a hand of a judge up in the air, and he is done. Ryan Kent takes Chicago in front of a home crowd. The redemption tour is back on. Ryan Kent is your winner. Absolutely massive for the American. Now it all comes down to 3rd place. Rylan Shadegg versus Alexander Ronkovic are going to battle it out for 2nd and 3rd. Paleo in 4th, Fernandez. And it's Rylan Shadegg in his debut Elite 15 race takes the silver. Massive, absolutely massive from the young man on the big stage for the very first time. 2 Americans, 1 and 2 in front of a home crowd. I wonder what that does to the girls who are racing next, watching on. Greg, whoo, big moments.
Amazing performances, amazing race, and let's just talk about the time as well. That's 55.12 for Ryan Kent, 55.46 for Ryan Shadegg. They're 2 of the fastest ever times in the sport. Not world record, but seriously fast times. Potentially, I would need to check. And there's Alex Ronkovic going over the line in 3rd. So we've got 3 people have claimed their sport for the World Championships in Nice in June. That's Ryan Kent in 1st, Rylan Shadegg in 2nd, and Alexander Ronkovic in 3rd. And even he, like, a minute behind Rylan Shadegg nearly, but still a 56.41, one of the fastest times we've seen in the sport.
But of course, the race is not over yet. Alexander Ronkovic, oh my God, my ability to speak has gone out the window. It's too exciting here in Chicago on Navy Pier. Alexander Ronkovic in 3rd, but a pre-qualifier already for the remaining majors because of his results at World Championships. And look, Paleo Fernandez from the bottom of the pack. He came into this race ranked 15th out of everyone, and he crosses in 4th. What a massive achievement for the Spaniards. Absolutely huge. And I know his wife will be watching on. She told the judging team that she wasn't willing to judge the men's races because she wanted to be there to support her other half. And he's done her proud today. Ah, there we go. Those are the scenes that we're all waiting for.
Love it, and I think that's over a 2-minute PB for Paleo as well. Incredible performance in his home city Unbelievable, and I think that also auto-qualifies him for the remaining majors of the season as well. And there's also that we haven't even talked about today is the prize money up for grabs for these $6,000 for the winner of this race, and then that rolls down. And so yeah, really like so much incentive for these guys to perform today. Now I think what we're seeing here, who's this crossing line? I think this is Rich Ryan going over in fifth. Another incredible performance from someone who's only claimed their place on the roll down. You know, he's been desperate to get into this elite lineup. He went to Spain earlier in the season to try and get a time. Ultimately came away from that race disappointing in the time that he set. But he's gone and he's done it on the big stage when it really matters to finish fifth. I think, again, that may also qualify him for the remaining majors of the season. I need to double check that. But he will be absolutely delighted with that performance.
I'm so loving that for Rich Ryan. That's great. James Kelly crossing the line in a 59.12. We haven't spoken a lot about Kelly, but he's another man who's completely upended his life to focus on this sport. Moving from Australia, last year he took 4 flights from Australia to Europe and the US to compete. Now he's gone to Germany, he's focusing in on training and coaching. And there goes Tim Vienisch as well. A really tough race for his first one back in the elite field for a long time. You can see he's really feeling that. Dylan Scott crossing the line in a 59.51. Dylan, after the week he's had, a vomiting bug on Monday, a really tough World Championships in Manchester. I'd like to think that kind of result will make him feel pretty good. Just get one on the books. We'll go again in Stockholm or in Vienna. There's plenty of time to secure that ticket to the World Championships.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Very early in the season, I think we've had 7 guys cross the line now, and they're all under 60 minutes. So that shows like the standard of this field. It shows like just how the sport is developing. To have the top 7 guys going under 60 minutes on the grid format this early in the season is pretty incredible.
Magida shaving nearly 5 minutes, if not a little bit more, off the time he recorded here this time last year with a 1:30. The American man clearly feeling the burn, as our Eugenio Bianchi in his nice little red hat also in, only 23 seconds behind Magida. It was always a tall order for someone like Magida, wasn't it? He's had a really tough year. He's been suffering injuries. At World Champs, he finished bottom of the pack because he was running on a broken vertebrae. Like, that man knows pain.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Essentially, he's been injured ever since Manchester.
Sean Jr., you're staying here now, locked off with a graphic over you. Just leave that locked, please. Paul Rouse, let's come back, please. Come back.
In contention for a podium was a tall order today.
To upstairs where we are.
Just over 60 minutes. That's a very, very impressive performance.
Kevin, where are you, please?
Been struggling with a vertebrae ever for the past 6 months. Now, since then, I think we've just seen Graham Halliday cross the line in 1:01, and then John Wynn is still out there. So both those guys, who I think probably before the race we would have hoped we would have expected to be higher up the finishing board than they currently are. So they've obviously had a tough day at the office. Now, whether that comes down to jet lag, like we often talk about with the European-based athletes when they come over to US, I don't know, but you know, it's hard to ever know really how much jet lag has impacted their performances. But I think we can certainly say that Graham Halliday in 1:01, and then John Wynn just crossed the line there, I believe, in 1:02. I need to check that. Yeah, 1:02. They won't be happy with those times, I don't think.
Yeah, both Graham Halliday and John Wynn, I think it probably expected a little bit more based on the conversations that I've had with them in the build-up to this race. But those are still really strong times in the scheme of things, especially on this race course when you take in consideration the average times of this time last year. I do think jet lag, as much as we think we can get through it, does have an impact. Just looking at who is at the top of the field and who isn't, but also home advantage plays a part as well. You know, the Brits had the benefit of that when they were in Manchester only 6 months ago. Kiwi Beau Wills with a 1:03.18 in his debut Elite 15 race. We barely had a chance to speak about Beau, but he missed out on World Championships by just 1 second. So massive congratulations to Beau, because this really has been a long time coming for him to make that step up to the elite level of the sport. Alphonse Du also crossing the line, the second Spaniard in this race, with just a couple of athletes still out there. As though the women have all left, because they were all watching alongside us mere moments ago, to walk in for their race, Greg. Now, I'm sure you can totally appreciate that we've had a few technical difficulties as Greg and I stand out on the balcony watching in real life on a singular microphone. And so we are trying to fix these in the short amount of time that we have between now and the female race. Obviously, if we can't get our cameras up and running, we can do nothing but apologize profusely. It always brings a few challenges with it, competing and broadcasting abroad, as we are learning on the fly. Oh, a few no reps down on the floor. These judges are ruthless in the best way. Massive thank you to all of our volunteers and judges as well. Without them, this sport would not continue. But Greg, let's turn our attention to the women's race. Now, 2 names jump off the roster. That's the understatement of the century in Lauren Weeks and Meg Jacobi. They have, or at least Lauren has, been at the top of the sport indefinitely for a very, very long time. Meg, more the newcomer. She's had 1 full season behind her, and in her second race she set the world record fastest time with a 58.58. These are the 2 women we expect to see leading the charge today.
Yeah, that is certainly. It feels like they're head and shoulders to a certain extent above the rest of the field. They're certainly the 2 favourites, and it is almost impossible to decide between them. I think we could ask 100 people who they think will win, and 50 would say Lauren, 50 would say Megan. You talked about, Megan's only been in the sport for just over a year, but it feels like she's been around for much longer. She set the world record in that time. She was the first woman to break 60 minutes in 58.58. Lauren has since achieved that feat as well, going under 60 minutes at the World Championships in Manchester, and then also actually in Dubai earlier in this season. So very, very hard to separate the 2 of them. Lauren is obviously the existing world champion. Lauren has, when they've gone head to head, Lauren has beaten her outside of America. So Lauren beat her in Manchester, and then she also beat her in Maastricht last year. But then Megan in Chicago last year beat Lauren. So it's very hard to separate the 2 of them, but on home soil, Megan has the advantage.
Kind of love it. And the fact that both of these ladies have confirmed that they're going to be racing every single major this season gives us great reason to get excited about that battle of the front as Peter Schiller crosses the line. Bless Peter. He's in the middle of his exams for the police force. He'll be missing the Scandinavian major because he's got to take an exam. He hasn't been training. He's away from his child. It's been a really tough build-up for the German, but he's across. A 1:06.51 for Peter Schiller. Going back to the women though, if, and it's a very big if, this doesn't play out like we expect, and Lauren and Meg are not leading the charge, who's coming up behind them?
I could stand here and list almost every other woman in the field as being in contention for the top 3. But let's start with some of the more obvious ones. There's Vivian Tafuto, the American. She finished 4th at the World Championships in Manchester. She's probably favourite for that 3rd spot, I would say. She's an athlete that consistently just chips away at her time, is getting better and better and better. She's not a natural runner. I think she's got a swimming history. She was a swimmer when she was younger, and in fact she was at the US Olympic swimming trials in 2016. She continues to work on her running. We don't probably really know where her ceiling is with her running. So if she can continue to improve at that and continue to chip away at her time in HYROX, then she's certainly a contender for third spot. And at some point, we can see her contending for those top 2 spots as well.
What about the likes of Alandra? Like that kind of, she's so experienced. She's been at the top of the sport. She seems to be a perennial 4th place finisher. I kind of hate that for her. You know, it must be so brutal to be so close, but she's not just balancing that. She has got a big girl job, is a foot and ankle surgeon. She didn't even fly in till late last night because, you know, she's out there, you know, being a doctor. It's quite an important job. But the balance that she's managed to find and still race to the level that she does, but what is it kind of realistically in your mind going to take to allow her to like transition into a top 3?
With Alandra, it's interesting. I think it's deceptive because sometimes you think of Alandra as not a great runner, but her running times are actually quite strong. But I think if you are talking about her competing with Lauren and Meg, then it will be the running where it needs to develop. But as it often is in a race like HYROX, she is a very strong, physically strong person. Like, she's good on the sled, she's good on the sled pull, she's good on the row. So it would likely be in the running where she would need to close that gap. But you know, 100% in contention for 3rd spot today. And like you say, finished 4th historically, 4th I believe here last year, 4th in Maastricht I believe, 4th at the previous World Championships. She didn't have a great World Championships in Manchester. I think she come unstuck on the sled pull and maybe even had some penalty issues on the sled pull that she struggled with. But certainly in contention for the top 3 spot today, as are many other athletes.
I know we're biased because we're both Brits. We're not biased at all. I'm taking it all back. We are massive fans of everyone out on the floor, but we have an incredible contingent of British females running. Top of that list, coming into this in 6th, Beck Mason. She's proved time and time again she's very at home at this level, but there's still a little bit of a gap to go from the top 6 that she got in Manchester to becoming a top 3. Is this the race where she could really push on and develop?
100% it is, 100%. She's certainly in contention for the top 3 spot today. Her performance in Manchester was extremely strong. She finished 6th, and she's another one who we see continuously improving and chipping away at her time. I know she's been working on her running. I know like things like her 5K time seem to have improved considerably over the summer. So it will be interesting to see what she does now. I know she's been struggling with her thigh to a certain extent. This is her first like individual race of the season, but she has had a go at the doubles in Spain. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how she does.
Tara Jackson there running on as the MCs announce our Elite 15 females to the floor. Alina Wilnau out of Germany, changing her coach this year. We'll see how that plays out. And there goes Linda Meyer as well. Both those ladies, Alina slightly newer in her career, Linda quite an experienced athlete, coming through obviously Germany where the sport originated. But they both have been in and out of mid-pack. Linda with the odd good results. But hopefully today, an opportunity for them to really stake a claim on the sport. There goes Beck Mason and Alandra Greenlee. Vivian Tafudo, the American on home soil, a contender for that 3rd place berth, potentially even rivaling the one, the only, the current world record holder, Megan Jacoby, who comes into this race ranked in 2nd behind the world champion, Lauren Weeks. These are the ladies you need to be keeping your eye on. Lauren already with so many unbelievable feats in her career, not just World Championship wins, but racing up to 6 months pregnant and then coming back from her pregnancy and taking gold in Manchester. That woman is just made of something different.
Yeah, she really is. That performance in Manchester 6 months ago was incredible. She looks so strong and running. And we talked during the men's race about compromise running, how it can hurt, how you really need to work on it. Lauren coming out of the stations looks so strong with her compromise running.
This is your start list. Mentioned Lauren Weeks at the top of that, Megan Jacobi, Vivian Tafuto. But down at the bottom, we have the Portuguese and the ladies from the United Kingdom. Kate Davey, Zara Piergiani. Two brand new talents out of the UK who have done well in the pro racing circuit. Their opportunity now to shine in elite as the tension grows. Megan Jacobi, blonde hair and headband, front and center. One person we've not spoken about is Camila Massa to the right of Jacobi. She was a little bit absent to a certain extent last year at the elite level, but you do not count out Camila.
No, you don't. And you could tell, like, following her just on social media, that she really, really wanted that elite space last year. And she went to work through the summer to try and claim it. You know, she turned up at the Manchester World Championships, competed in the age group, done extremely well there, and then went to work on getting that elite spot. And she's come back, and her time in Milan of 105, qualified her for these elites. You can see the trajectory that she's on in terms of her performance, and her running continues to improve.
She had a 9th here last year with a 109.31. Based on the times that we've seen in the men's race, I've no doubt those kinds of times are going to come right back down. Stand by. Racing to commence. The tension builds. The MCs go quiet. The pounding heart in your chest gets louder. We've all been in this position, whether you're elite, whether you are an age group athlete, whether you're like me and you do it for fun on the odd occasion. Nothing beats standing on that start line in the HYROX World Series. And they are off. The Women's Elite 15 Series is underway here in Chicago. And they are starting at pace. Weeks leading the way.
And that's what we might have expected. Lauren often likes to go out hot. She often likes to try and stretch this field. Both myself and Lauren were talking to Megan last night about how she paces this race, what she's gained from experience over the past year of competing in HYROX. And I think she alluded to the fact that she's got confidence in herself now to run her own race. And I don't think she's going to allow Lauren Weeks to drag her out faster than she wants to at this point.
Yeah, and on her shoulder at the moment, Viola Oberlander out of Munich, Germany. Viola is one of the most experienced racers in the field, but she struggled this time last year in Chicago with a little bit of jet lag. Because of that, she's more attuned to it this time around. She was second in the 2021 World Championships. She's got the women's relay world record, and it was her World Championship time, 01:04:07 in Manchester, that qualified her for today. She's one that is certainly in contention when we're talking top 3, just based off her prior experience.
Yeah, very, very experienced athlete, very strong. the sleds won't intimidate her, for example. If she has been working on her running, she's been able to develop her running to try and compete with the top ladies, then she's certainly in contention for the top 3 spots anyway, but can be pushing on for those top 2.
She'll be wanting to improve on her 5th from Manchester. As the female field start their opening 1 kilometer, 1.9 laps. Not the easiest thing to explain, but much like the men, these lovely long straightaways to really settle in to your run. Actually, on that, just how tough is it to settle in on a run in this sport?
There's an element of, I think practicing your pacing in training, because it's very easy, certainly on this first run, where it's really the only point in the race where you are completely fresh. It's easy to get to go out too hot. So that comes from training at race pace, and trusting yourself that you can do it, and trusting your pace that is right, that you, if the other ladies go out ahead of you, that you can just hold back and run at the pace that you want to. Because if you allow yourself to get dragged out, then it can ruin the rest of the race for you.
And our athletes are on to their ski ergs. Let's take a little look at who leads. You've got Weeks, followed by Overlander. First in off the run. They are all, though, exceptionally close. 5 seconds separating the top 10. Weeks, Overlander, Tafuto, Jacoby, Mason, Massa, Jackson, Greenlee, Meyer, and Villeneuve in that top 10 position. Jacoby, though, in 4th at the moment. Nothing to be worried about, I'm sure, Greg.
Well, no, because, you know, there's such little time that separate them all. They've essentially all come in as a group. Megan is very good on the ski, as is Lauren. And like we talked about before, but it will be tempting to try and push it, to try and come out ahead of the others. But 5 seconds faster on the ski can cost you like minutes later in the race.
I mean, we've mentioned that we sat down with Megs yesterday, and actually one of the kind of most pertinent things for me that came out of the chat that we had was that she had a really hard year last year, and we would have never have seen that because all we saw was her bossing it on the racetrack. But she's got, you know, an 8-year-old at home that she's constantly leaving to go racing, and she has a full-time job, and actually the balance of all of that, she felt actually really weighed on her mentally. Now, the good news is, coming into this 2024 World Championship season, is that this is her last week of her quote-unquote big girl job, which means she can go whole hog into her coaching and her online programming and being a full-time athlete and mum, which I think is actually a really special thing to be able to achieve.
Which is a similar thing to what we were saying about Ryan Kent earlier. Ryan has now been able to focus on the sport, you know, train like a professional full-time athlete, and he's just dominated the field. Well, not dominated the field, but he's won very convincingly. And Megan will have experience a similar benefit from something like that. Now, if we talk about their ski times, not necessarily ski times within a HYROX, but their 2K ski times. If we look through the field, Megan and Lauren have 2 of the stronger 2-kilometre ski times. Around 7:38 for Megan, 7:35 for Lauren. So very, very strong on these on this station.
Look at their technique. There's a real variety. I mean, with the ski erg, it's about getting as great a reach as possible with your hands and then pulling down, whether you're using your legs or your abdomen or in fact your triceps. And every athlete's going to be a little bit different in that regard, pending their strengths and weaknesses of what's coming up. I would be thinking personally about protecting my legs as much as possible, knowing the sleds are underway, especially when this is only the opening. 1,000 meters of a very long race. But as you can see, it was Lauren Weeks and Viola Oberlander who were currently 1 and 2. Hopefully, we'll have some indication of how they're getting on in the ski, as Lauren Weeks is done and gone. The 2023 World Champion, the first off the ski. But no one is that far behind, including Megan Jacobi, Alina, Viola Oberlander. Our stat system is like, you know, doing its own thing. But sometimes it works. Here we go. Lauren Weeks, Megan Jacobi, Viola Oberlander, Vivian Tafuto, Tara Jackson, and Camila Massa. But yes, Lauren Weeks very much in control at the moment. She's got herself a 6-second buffer, but those 6 seconds don't feel very long at all at this stage in the race, do they, Greg?
No, they don't. The early stages of HYROX are where Lauren in particular is very strong, especially if we're comparing her against Megan. You know, the ski, she takes the running out hot, she comes through the sleds normally stronger, and it's where Megan has the strength in the latter half of the race to claw back some time. And I think that's, you know, what she was alluding to when she was talking to us last night in terms of having the confidence to run her own race, having the confidence to sort of let Lauren go to a certain extent in the knowledge that she can claw back the time later on.
Did we mention that we spoke to Megan Jacobi yesterday? It was a really nice conversation. I think that's why he was so chatty about it. But you've got Viola Oberlander in third. The German woman just holding off by a little bit of a gap, 7 seconds, Vivian Tafuto. Now, Tafuto is just another Miss Consistent, isn't she? She just seems to be really good at pretty much everything. But this is her first HYROX since Worlds, and she came 4th there. Holding off, in fact, Viola Oberlander by literally just 3 seconds. So I do think we're likely to see a little bit of to and fro from both those athletes. But that's exactly what we want, right, Greg? We want a great competition of girls who are constantly changing places and giving us a little bit of fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously everyone has their own different strengths and weaknesses through these races. Some will be in the lead towards the start, some will be doing better than others, and then it can claw back at the later stages of the race. So it will be very interesting to see. We've seen in the men's race the impact that that roll down athletes can make in the race as well, just because, you know, there's people like Maria Fessi, Kate Davey, Zara Piagiani. They're here on a roll down, but they'll be encouraged by what they've seen in the men's race, where people like Paleo, Rich Ryan finishing in the top 5. It will give them some confidence that it can be done, and yeah, like we said, that top 3 spot is very much up for grabs. I think that will give them confidence that it is possible.
Yeah, almost more so, because we haven't really gone into it in any depth, but there are a lot of females who aren't here. Michaela Norman, top of that list, the winner of last year's North American Championships with a 102.04, but also Nobel McFarlane, the 3rd place finisher from World Champs in Manchester, Miriam von Rohr, Jana Thompson, and Krista Rogloski. You know, that actually really opens up those midfield top 5 positions, just kind of based on previous results. So there's going to be a lot of girls who perhaps came in on roll down who are going to be pushed. They might find themselves a slightly faster pacing and a more regular position in majors going forward, which I think is so exciting, especially given the talent on display.
I think that's Lauren Weeks just coming in for the sled push there. And she's, maybe that was 5 seconds ahead of Megan. So not a huge gap opening up at all at this stage.
the 50-meter sled push, 152 kilograms, including the sled on there for our women. And, well, light work, is that fair to say? But honestly, being up on your tiptoes and pushing the sled, it blows out your posterior chain. Your calves are on fire, your ankles are probably hurting, and your heart rate's going through the roof just because of the sheer exertion. So it's finding a pace you can maintain and a position that works. You can see the girls opting for the shoulder on bar approach. How does that help?
The technique that you see on sled push, I think, just differs from person to person, depending on their size, their weight, their height. Different people are going to prefer different techniques. And what you just saw with Lauren there is sometimes it's nice to mix up the techniques. So, there she's using her forearms, but on the previous push she was using her hands on the poles. So it just eases off certain muscles slightly using different techniques. But they're both pushing very, very well here, moving it well. They are taking little breaks. Obviously they have to manage their legs. They don't want to ruin the rest of their race, but they're consistently pushing, consistently chipping away at that 50 meters.
Tafuto in third, Oberlander down to fourth on the sled push. This is such an absolute grind, but Tafuto, out of Texas, just on the outskirts of Austin. She hasn't had to travel that far. It's quite a nice little flight over across the middle of America. But she has had a real focus so far on DECA. In your experience of that competition, like, how much does the training translate? The sense I get from the athletes, especially certain ones like Tara Jackson, for example, is that the training's pretty similar to a certain extent until you maybe want to challenge for the top spots.
Yeah, I think that's just it. It is a different event. There's certainly less strength requirements in it. The running is incredibly important, as it is in HYROX, but it's a much more intense event. So it lasts maybe like half the length of a HYROX. So they're running generally at a faster pace, very intense. The training, to answer your question, the training I think translates to a certain extent. But I think if you, like you said, if you really, really want to compete, then I don't think you can train for one sport and expect to compete at the top in another.
7 seconds between Weeks and Jacoby. But going back to Tafuto, this time last year, this was her first ever Elite 15. Given how much we say her name, that seems kind of mental because she's really actually asserted herself in HYROX as a sport. She was saying that her real focus needed to be her running when I spoke to her in the build-up to this event, and she's worked really hard on that in the off-season, but to the point where in those opening runs she was willing to kind of exert more. She had more confidence in her ability to go with the pack. Yeah, Vivian, and can you imagine the kind of confidence that gives you in general when you know you're up against the likes of Weeks and Jacoby?
Yeah, and Vivian's another one where if you talk to the other elite athletes in the field and they talk about, who would you rate for the top three outside of Megan and Lauren, then Vivian's name was coming up repeatedly. And Lauren, I heard Lauren on the podcast the other day saying, I think people are sleeping on Vivian. I think like I said, the trajectory that she's on, the way she consistently improves, I think the other elite athletes appreciate what a great athlete she is.
She told me she did a 19:25K tempo run recently, and that was a really kind of like a big moment for her to go sub 20. So we're kind of seeing it translate to a certain extent, but Weeks still very much the forerunner there. A lovely cadence, big strides, looking super confident in her body language. See me taking all those tips from Chris Hinshaw. Look at that body language. Doesn't it? She look comfortable. And she is just an athlete through and through.
After her performance in Manchester at the World Championships, it felt like the word of the day was relentless. Everyone just said her performance was relentless. Her running was just relentless. She comes out of a really impressive sled push, and she just runs like that, looking really, really strong. There's no sign of her feeling compromised. There's no sign of the heavy breathing or the you know the struggling legs. She just comes and she looks really, really strong.
Is mum strength a thing? No, because that is, you tell me, I'm not a mum yet. That was very presumptuous. But it is interesting that actually the current age group that we do see competing at this level are slightly older than more traditional sports. I mean, in general, in fact, in endurance sports, I would say the average age is a little bit older, and kind of not to its detriment. But do you think we will begin, as the sport takes a bit of like a foothold in its kind of own ability and own age, we'll see that age come down? That was a long way of saying that, wasn't it?
I guess that just remains to be seen. The average age of this field, both on the men and the women's side, is around 32, but that is dragged down to a certain extent by some of the younger athletes. Obviously, we've seen people in the elite field. It goes up to 38 today. We saw in Manchester people in their 40s competing in the elite. So it certainly can be done at the at the older age groups. I know personally speaking, in HYROX, I'm in the 40 to 44 age group, and the performances there are very, very strong. It starts to, the times start to decline from that point onwards, but yeah, there's certainly people that have competed in the elites up to the age of 40.
So your top four remain the same, but Massa, Maya and Mason are not far behind. Or Rebecca Mason, I mean, she is probably at this stage the biggest talent to come out of the UK, someone that you've had a lot of interaction with over the years. What can you tell us about Beck?
Bex is another, I know I seem to keep saying this, but consistently chips away at her time and consistently improves. I think she was really pleased with her performance in Manchester 6 months ago. I think she went into that race hoping for top 10, probably secretly hoping for higher in top 10, but she wanted top 10 and she finished 6th. It looked really, really strong. She's worked on her running. I know she's been struggling with injuries, but has still been able to train very well despite the injury. And like I say, her 5K running time has improved significantly. So yeah, she's a very strong athlete, and certainly on the trajectory to be in contention for some of these top spots.
She's recently changed her longtime coach as well, Jade Skillen, now working with Tom Hogan purely for that running focus, as the ladies are back to back on the sled pull. Lauren Weeks to the right, Megan Jacoby to the left of your screen. Tafuto and Oberlander, your 3 and 4. But they are building a solid gap of 20-odd seconds. Only 2 separating your leading 2. As tight as we imagined, Greg. This is what we're here for.
Yeah, exactly. Following on from what a close men's race it was, this is shaping up to be the same. So coming into this sled pull station, just 2 seconds separated Lauren and Megan. Then Vivian was just 20 seconds behind them, and Viola was 59 seconds behind Lauren. So it's very, very close at the top there. A lot of athletes looking very strong. And this will be interesting. And Megan will be very encouraged here. Like I said earlier, Lauren is strong throughout the race. There are no weaknesses, let's be clear on that. But the advantage that she has over Megan is generally in the early stages of the race, coming through the sleds. So if Megan can come out in contention with Lauren after these sleds and be feeling relatively good, if she can continue to hold her run at this point after, along with Lauren, then she'll be really encouraged.
Meg, though, slightly ahead of Lauren Weeks in that lane number 2 from the left. But we are talking minimal, but that does mean that for the first time in this race, Megan Jacoby is taking a small lead but the time where she really pushes ahead, or should she settle back into a certain pace?
This is the interesting point here on the grid. Then next to it, and I think Megan's out there. Megan's out, and Lauren. Let's see how far Lauren is behind. Maybe one last pull there. So, yeah, maybe 10 seconds behind Megan. So Megan's opened up a lead there. They came into that station effectively neck and neck, and Megan's opened up a strong lead. So let's see how this running looks. She looks really strong. She is a runner. She's probably the best runner in this field, and she's looking strong so far. She's coming out of there looking confident. And there's Vivian Tafuto that's come out there in third spot, maybe 20 seconds behind Lauren.
Don't sleep on Vivian Tafuto, that's all I'm saying. Austin's own. But yeah, your top three, Jacoby, Weeks, Tafuto. A little bit of a change out onto this run. This seems to be suiting Megan Jacoby, these nice long runs down the long side of Festival Hall here in Navy Pier, Chicago. I can't quite believe we're saying that we're kicking off the season in Navy Pier. Like, it's just such an iconic venue to start the majors. And if the community running and racing this morning's anything to go by, you know, the atmosphere out on the floor, now we're back in our booth, must be utterly incredible for the athletes who are running around. And we all know, being Brits and super serious, that the Americans are loud and an absolutely fantastic audience.
Yeah, I must say you know, I'm used to the UK events where they're very, very popular. You know, the atmosphere is amazing, but the atmosphere here today has been very similar. It's a huge venue that we're in. Thousands of athletes, thousands of spectators. The atmosphere has been brilliant, and you know the crowd are very, very excited too about these elite races and the performances that we're seeing.
Linda Meyer, not on your screen, but done with her sleds as she takes back to the track. In our booth here, we have a couple of different screens. So what you're seeing is not necessarily what we're seeing, as Megan Jacoby is still comfortably out front, and by the looks of it, giving herself a real buffer. That looks like a decent amount of space that she's managed to accumulate between herself and Lauren Weeks.
That's on that point. That's going to be really interesting to see these runs. Does she open up a bigger gap on Lauren on this run? Because that will give a clear indication as to how they're feeling coming out the sleds. So the gap leaving the sled pool was just 9 seconds between them. But Megan is looking really strong, and I don't get the feeling that the gap is being closed between the two of them on this run. It remains to be seen, obviously, but yeah, that will be interesting to see what's the gap when they come into the burpees.
Alina Will now also joins them on track, coming out of that sled pull. Obviously, Jacoby and Weeks, you're 1 and 2, Tafuto 3. But Viola Oberlander is occupying that 4th spot, and Camila Massa in 5th, just holding Rebecca Mason to 6th. Now that is going to be the battle for the potential spots to World Championships. Of course, the top 3 automatic qualifiers, but for the remaining majors of the season, roll downs.
Roll downs are possible to auto qualify for the remaining majors, and then also even just getting a good time that potentially qualifies them based on time. So they'll be looking to do that, and if this course is, you know, shaping up to be a quick one, as you know, some of the men would seem to indicate it is, then even if they feel they're not in contention for the top 3 or the top 5, they still want to be putting in a good time to potentially qualify them for future majors. Now, in that battle for top 3, you know, leaving the sled pool, Vivian and Viola were in 3rd and 4th. They are reasonably strong athletes. They're comfortable on the sleds. Behind them, people like Camila, Rebecca Mason, Linda Meyer, Terry Jackson, they're very strong in the latter half of the race as well, so they'll be confident that they can close the gap on them too as the race progresses.
Yeah, it's almost the perfect place for them to be, as Megan Jacoby is first onto the Burpee broad jumps. No sign of fatigue or stopping for the American. There is now a 22-second gap between Megan and Lauren. I mean, that we've seen bigger gaps come down, let's be honest, but that's promising.
For Megan, that's very promising, yes. So she opened up 13 seconds, 12, 13 seconds on that last run alone, which is a significant difference for these two ladies. You know, not much separates them on the running generally, so 9-second difference on one run is quite significant. So Megan will be very, very encouraged by that, and she's looking strong on these burpees. These burpees, like we said earlier, jack your heart rate up. It can start to feel really compromised, really struggling, but she's just chipping away at them, keeping moving, you know, not showing signs of fatigue at this stage.
If you are a slightly new viewer to the sport of HYROX, you'll notice that the athletes' hands have to be within 1 foot of their landing spot of their 2 feet, and they have been instructed in their athletes' briefing yesterday that it needs to be a 2 foot takeoff and landing. They are very stringent on the movement standards to make sure that the sport's fair and accessible for everyone. They are, however, allowed to step up, very much the same in CrossFit. If that is your background, the step up is fine as long as you take off 2 feet, land on 2 feet, and put your hands down within a foot of your landing square. The field now very much joining Lauren, Meg, and Vivian on the Burpee broad jumps. This lovely wide angled shot showing your top 6. Distance is always interesting in the jump, as Megan Jacoby, done and dusted with the Burpee broad jumps, transitions into her run. Let's go, Jacoby. But yeah, the distance of the jumps, how do you keep your heart rate at a point that it isn't over-compromised, because it's such a gassy part of the workout to go run burpees run. We were chatting about it with Chris Hinshaw earlier. You know, keeping your heart rate at a level that's manageable is really important. And if that's taking smaller jumps, then that's what you should do, even though it maybe requires more burpees and blows out your triceps a bit more. I mean, who needs triceps on a row, right? Honestly, this is just a total assault on every single body part. And so much of it is mental. How deep into the pain cave can you go?
So Lauren is now out of the Burpee broad jump to 23 seconds behind Megan. So no real change in their times on that station. They both performed incredibly impressively. They both, you know, kept moving, kept chipping away at it. They're going to be hurting on this run though. There's Lauren on the screen there. She's looking like she's running very strong, as we often see with Lauren. 22 seconds between them.
What you do notice, though, is Linda Meyer has jumped over Beck Mason. She's now top 6. Linda Meyer building through this part of the workout. Obviously, a little bit of gassy running right up her street.
We've talked about, you know, Megan and Lauren, and Megan, the world record holder. It's easy to forget that Linda, at the start of last season, broke the world record twice. She was, you know, she set some very, very impressive times in the sport, and I think has struggled with injury since then, you know, and hasn't necessarily been able to replicate that performance. We know it's within her. We know, you know, I think she did a 102 something at the start of last season. So the potential is there. So if she can, if she's had a good off season, if she's been able to, you know, have a good training block, then we potentially could see some very fast times.
Her qualifier for this race, Clone, a 1:05:20, that put her in second, and she ran an extra lap. You know, this is a woman who really should be talked about maybe more than she is. And I mean, we didn't see a great deal of her in the build up to this race, and we haven't really had a chance to catch up about how she's feeling. But I mean, if we're basing it off this performance, I'd say she's looking pretty good.
She's experienced as well. She's experienced in the sport. She's been for a few years. She's been on the grid. She's used to the grid format. So yeah, she's looking very good. And we've got some splits come up. So let's look at the splits while we've got them. So like we said, Megan and Lauren came out 23 seconds apart out of that Burpee broad jump. Vivian was in third, 1 minute 42 seconds behind Megan. In fourth, Camila Massa, she was around 40 seconds behind Vivian. Then Viola and Becky Mason came out around the same time. So Camila, Viola and Becky Mason in fourth, fifth and sixth, but essentially neck and neck. And they were very closely followed by Linda. So it is a very, very, very close race for third at the moment. Vivian is edging it, but like I said, Camila, Becky Mason, Linda Meyer, they're strong in the latter half of this race.
And while the leaders are coming in following their run, look at Megan Jacoby there, just so comfortable. Obviously working as well with Rich Ryan, who we saw come in fifth in the men's race. Rich Ryan specifically programming her running. Like, clearly those two have found a bit of a special ingredient, haven't they, working together with two real standout performances this weekend already.
Yeah, both actually, like, two of the actual, if we were talking just pure running abilities, two of the strongest runners in the field actually. And you know, clearly they've been having a good training block between them. And Ryan Kent, I know that there's a lot of them that they train together quite often, so they're all performing at the moment extremely well today. Now is that Megan coming in to the row? Yes, so that's Megan on the row. Let's see how far Lauren Weeks is behind her. So Lauren, the gap has opened up in that last run. The gap between Megan and Lauren has opened up by another few seconds. A 35-second difference between them coming into the row.
Oh, the row. A time for one to collect themselves. Get your breathing back under wraps. Maybe shake out that muscle. Yeah, none of that happens. I'm totally lying. It's one of the worst periods because it really feels like you're at that halfway point, right? It's very much dawning on you that you still got 3 more rounds to go and so much more running.
The interesting dynamic, if you like, on the row is that they're sitting next to each other, so they can see what paces the other is running, they can see what distance is between them. And because it's a machine, because it shows you your pace, it gives you it almost like it's feedback as to how you're feeling. Like you know you can go onto this machine fresh and pull a certain rate per 500 meters. If you're really struggling, then the machine will show you that, and your paces will show you that. So you know, if Lauren's going to be conscious that she wants to claw back that 35 seconds somehow on Megan, she's going to be having little glances to the side, seeing what Megan's screen is showing, seeing how far she is behind, seeing what pace she's going, and then she's going to be tempted to try and push it, to try and top that pace. But will that push her over the edge and compromise her for the rest of it?
So that looks like it's Vivian Tafuto running into the rock zone. As we know, Megan Jacoby is well past the 300-meter mark. Yes! And that's Weeks as well, past the 300-meter mark. Just under a third of the way through this workout on the rower. As the rest of the field join them, let's let them enjoy their row. Look at the bottom of this field, the roll downs. What excites me about this is that many of them are in their debut of the Elite 15, but they all kind of, to a certain extent, came through together out of running in the pro race at World Championships in Manchester. So Maria Fesic, Zara Piergiani, they were a part of a bit of a sprint finish to a certain extent. But they feel like they're going on this journey together. Kate Davey was there as well. They're all on this journey together. How much does that almost take the pressure off of this absolutely monumental moment in their career where they're suddenly on the world stage surrounded by your world record holders in Lauren Weeks and Meg Jacobi?
It's a fantastic experience for them. You're right, it does feel like some of them are coming through it together. I know Kate and Zara are good friends, for example, but it helps to push each other on as well. You're all chasing a very similar goal, the same goal really, and that it pushes you on to be surrounded by people like that. The experience today, competing on the grid, competing against some of the best athletes in the world, it's a huge amount of experience that can be beneficial for you going forward. So even if they're not, racing for the top 3 today necessarily, the experience that they gain can only benefit them in the future.
Maria Fesic's debut was in fact in Chicago in the pro, as Megan is done and dusted on her rower. We need a nickname for her, like the Blonde Machine. Super Flash. I'm not sure. I'm just making all sorts up now. Everyone's just laughing at me in the room. We need to find her a superhero name. And Lauren Weeks, of course. Weeks and Jacobi on another whirlwind adventure in the HYROX World Series. You're 1 and 2 at the moment. But look at that. I would say the gap is growing. As we see Lauren Weeks still on her rower. Not, though, looking fatigued in any way, but also not looking like she's panicking as she just finishes off her final couple of 100 meters. She's not particularly looking fatigued. That just leads me to think that Megan Jacobi is just on another level today. We'll try and get you the splits of the time difference between them all. 51 seconds now, Megan Jacobi on Lauren Weeks as Vivian Tafuto has passed the 900-meter mark. Only a couple more pulls for Vivian Tafuto, who's looking to have largely wrapped up this 3rd place. But Linda Mayer next to her on the rower, like we said, growing through. Do not sleep on Linda Mayer. Who of these ladies are going to come off first? Look at the far right-hand side of your screen, and Viola Oberlander's interesting technique there. To me, either she knows something that we don't on the rower, or she's beginning to get tired. You can see her really utilizing her legs over her arms. That's the kind of thing I do when it's starting to get hard. But Megan, look at her, the runaway train from the USA. Her pace and cadence doesn't seem to have changed one bit. And check out this camera angle to keep up with these guys. We've got a cameraman on a scooter going around track with these athletes. I mean, when the signal is good, this shot is sweet. Jacobi Weeks, you're 1 and 2, just over 50 seconds separating the 2 best in the world. I mean, Craig, we spoke about the fact that these 2 are likely going to be the runaways. But I don't think we gave much thought to how tight 3rd could be.
It really could be. There's so much talent in the field, and with people like, we talked about Michaela Norman not competing today and really opening up that 3rd spot for them, that a lot of ladies would have felt like maybe they can get there. So
You just saw Viola Oberlander and Linda Meyer getting off the rower within maybe 2 seconds of one another. Two Germans battling it out. They're going to be fighting for that third place position, and things are tight. Just like we were saying, the battle for third is like they perfectly brought that together for us. But also super exciting to see Europeans in the mix when there was the possibility that being in Chicago and with time frames and jet lag and heavy sleds, that they might have fallen down the pack. But you know what? They're doing pretty well.
Yeah, they absolutely are. You never really know how jet lag is going to impact you, and I think it can impact one person differently to another. But you know, some of these ladies are doing very well here. Now, one interesting point here in that battle for third spot is Vivian is 30, 40 seconds ahead of Camila leaving that row. But we know from Milan that Camila was very, very strong on her wall ball. She's clearly been working on that over the summer. So you can claw that time back on the wall balls if Vivian gets there, and I'm getting ahead of myself because I know we're not there yet, but even just on one station that can happen.
Camila has unbroken wall balls in Manchester, so we know if she gets to that wall ball station and say there's 20 seconds in it, she could climb that right back. I mean, every single drop for a wall ball probably takes about 3 seconds. If you take a break, you know, there's a good chance that could take up four wall ball shots, and she could build that right back into it. She's had an injury-free off-season as well, which like always helps. This course, the North American Championships course, was her Elite 15 debut a few years ago, so she's very confident here. I had a really interesting conversation with her, actually. She's got a figure skating background, and you go, okay, so maybe that doesn't exactly translate, but you've done some sport. But she had her first child at 21. She's now got 3 children, so she has been a mum, and she's done like many years of her life just not doing any sort of training at all. And then at one point she just went, oh, you know what, I want to start training for something. That was only 2.5 years ago. You know, mum of 3, started training for something, and now she's comfortably, you know, in the top 5 of HYROX race. It's really impressive.
It's very impressive, and I also think when someone hasn't come from a background that they've been running at a high level for all of their lives, I think that's exciting to see what the potential is as you go forward. You know, if someone really does focus on their running, even if it is like, you know, not, you know, when you're 15, 16, 17, 18 years old or something like that, it means that the improvements that you can make can be significant. Now, we've got Megan and Lauren both in on the farmers' carries here. Lauren came in 54 seconds behind Megan there, so she's not closing that gap.
I mean, no, not on the run, but you should have seen the pace that she took off when she picked up those 2 those 2 kettlebells. But look, Megan Jacoby already gone. I don't think there's anything that Lauren Weeks is going to be able to do now to catch her. That's just, Megan is just on fire. It's too much of a gap as Lauren tries to push and eke every ounce out of herself with those 2 24-kilogram kettlebells.
Another point to make here is that like the next station with the lunges is one where traditionally Megan has been stronger than Lauren. So if we look at Megan's world record pace, the lunges were a fairly incredible time there. When we saw Lauren earlier in the season racing Dubai, throughout the race I was following it, and Lauren was consistently ahead at that world record pace until it got to the lunges, and that's where she dropped the time. So there's nothing to indicate at this stage that Lauren's going to claw back time on lunges. Obviously we don't know how Megan is feeling, if she has gone out too hot and then just like the lunges, you know, kill her, or the wall balls kill her and she can't do them unbroken like she typically can, then that remains to be seen. It's always possible, but for Megan to have this lead at this stage of the race, when she knows deep down inside that she's very strong on these last 2 stations, she's going to be feeling very good.
1 minute, 2 seconds. She's only extending that lead. It's such an impressive performance from Jacoby. I know she is, you know, she was like the model second place finisher, the runner-up at the World Championships, but you could really sense that disappointment. Like, you really sense that she thought she could do more. So it's so awesome to see her throw down in this way, take on the current world champion, Lauren Weeks, and really just dominate. But, like, this is one end of the field, right? Like, I do believe that we've got so many incredible women racing today, and there are a couple of roll downs at the other end of the field that are worth talking about. Daniela Couto out of Portugal. She's a mixed relay world record holder. Tiago Luza, part of that, as is Maria Fensick. But, like, she never did any sport growing up either. None. Absolutely none. At 18, she occasionally went to the gym a little bit. She's never run. She started CrossFit 2 years ago. Do you know how wild that is? She's never done anything. She sat on the sofa and ate chips, you know? Like, and then 2 years ago, she went, oh, I might try CrossFit. And then now, look where she is. She's on the big stage in America doing her thing. I don't know, she's taken a first place in Valencia in the 25 to 29 age group. It's just so cool to see that.
So there's a really interesting dynamic in that chase for the third spot. So Vivian is currently in third spot as they leave the Farmers Carries, 2 minutes and 8 seconds behind Megan. But Linda is closing that gap on her. So she was 2:42 behind. So, you know, 34 seconds behind Vivian. But that gap is closing. Like, it closed at the Farmers Carries. So she's she's chasing for that third spot. And so it'll be interesting to see what she can do on the lunges, what she can do on the wall balls. It's really heating up, and you know Linda's 2:42 behind Megan, but then Viola's just 1 second behind Linda, and then Camilla is just a few seconds behind Viola. Becky Mason's essentially neck and neck with Camilla. There's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 women there within seconds of each other for that third place and that a place at the World Championships as well.
I can't wait for the warbles. That is going to be exciting, and we're not going to know what's going on. But that's what's going to be so exciting for me when we start getting to these other major races, right? Those top 5, because we've got rollbacks. Once Lauren and Meg have secured their tickets, we know they're racing at every single major race. So even if they are coming 1 and 2 at the majors, suddenly we've got 3 spots we can be talking about who are going to world champs in, you know, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, which gets super exciting with this middle group of athletes who right now are fighting for 5th and potentially a roll down based on the legacy invites. But we're going to be having this conversation every time we go to a major. Like, who's coming 4th and 5th? Suddenly we can talk about so many more people. I don't know. It just makes the sport the sport. It's about the race within a race. It's not just about who's leading. And that is a really exciting place to be in, especially when things are so tight in the middle of the table. Megan Jacoby lunging her way to victory. I really hope I'm not doing the whole commentator's curse thing here. But she's looking super confident. There is no middle steadying step that you can see when fatigue steps in. I mean, volunteers, the heart and soul of the HYROX community, all decked out in our principal partner, Puma. I put on their trainers today, and I told you, didn't I, while we were walking over, I felt like I was walking on a cloud. I don't know, it's because I never wear runners. So it might have been because I was wearing runners for the first time. But no, they are very comfy indeed. Side note, a bird just flew in here. Welcome to the commentary box here at the HYROX Open Major here in Chicago.
So Lauren's just come into the Sandbag lunges as well, but she's 1 minute 11 behind Megan at this point. And Megan doesn't look like she's slow, and she's just stepping through confidently there, looking really, really good. So I don't think the gap is going to... Lauren will really, really have to move here to close the gap.
The gap's got bigger. It's improved an extra 9 seconds now. Jacoby has on Weeks, 1 minute 11 now. Like, I honestly can't see where that's going to be made up.
No, it's very hard to see now. If Megan was like poor at wall balls and we knew that Lauren can go unbroken, then maybe we'd be saying, yeah, it can be done at the wall balls. Megan has fairly consistently recently done unbroken wall balls, so it is hard to see where the gap can be made up. Should also mention the time that Megan's doing here, so she came into those sandbag lunges in just under 49 minutes. That's like on for a very impressive time, potentially a sub 60 that I think we're going to see here from her.
How exciting! Nothing gets you more fired up than a sub 60 in the female field. Absolutely love it. I mean, it just goes to show that the boundaries are being broken by the female athletes at the moment, and especially, I mean, as we've already established, I'm not a mum, but one day I hope to be, but to see it done by women who have children and who have lives and jobs, like, that just gets me so excited as a female athlete in the space, albeit at the community level. It really is a sport for absolutely everyone, and watching the elites here today in their incredible athletic performance, you know, that's only the tip of the iceberg, because you've got people using this to challenge themselves like day to day. Personally, in my box, I've got 6 or 7 members, and we only operated around 80 members, you know, like all like signed up for their first ever HYROX race this year. Like, that's how this is now kind of taking a bit of a foothold. These are people who only started CrossFit, because we're very new, started CrossFit, you know, about a year ago. And they are looking for ways to, you know, test themselves, and they're looking to HYROX to do that, which is really, really cool. And we're all going to travel up to Glasgow and Berlin, I think, are our 2 that we're doing. You know, a little bit of a Welsh contingent. Let's go.
Just on that point about, you know, Megan being a mum and having a job and still operating at these levels, these elite athletes are huge inspirations to the rest of the community. We're going to see like 175,000 athletes in HYROX next year, 65 races. The sport is growing so much, and these are at the top of that sport, and they're an inspiration. And it's easy to look at these people and say, oh, they're just professional athletes, they just train all day, they've got no other worries, nothing to worry about. But it's not like that at the moment in the sport. You know, eventually I think we'll see it professionalise. You know, sponsorship opportunities will open up. We've got the prize money, but right now it'll always be an inspiration, really. But really, just going to that point about Megan being a mum, Lauren being a mum, they're a huge inspiration to all the other athletes.
The final steps for Lauren Weeks on the sandbag lunges, and she'll join Megan Jacoby on the final run as Jacoby laps Carolina Silva from Portugal, our 15th ranked athlete out on the field. Just goes to show how fast Jacoby has been out there. Absolutely incredible. One more step for Weeks, and she is on to her final kilometer. But you sense the change in music, the tension builds as Megan Jacoby starts believing, starts thinking, starts imagining, starts knowing that this title could be hers. And the gaps opened just wildly, 1:41. Jacoby is taking this by storm. The crowd certainly getting hyped here on Navy Pier in Festival Hall as Megan Jacoby closes out her final kilometer. Vivian, third lane from the left. Linda Meyer only meters behind. And Camila Massa probably a little bit further on. Tafuto, though, looking like she is done, and she's gone. Maya not far behind at all as she makes her remaining few lunges. And that is Linda Meyer in. How many seconds do we reckon that rolls, Greg? Like maybe like 10? What does the magic oracle of our stats machine that works 50% of the time tell us it's not magic at all at the moment. But that battle is on. If Linda Meyer can pull it back on this final run and get into the wall balls within what? 22 seconds difference at the moment. That is easily caught up on a run and some wall balls. Easily. I say easily. But it's definitely a possibility. I would love to see a German break up that podium party of Americans. And it's not because I'm European, but how exciting that Linda Meyer is really back to her best. You know, back on a podium and challenging at the home of all of these American ladies. I mean, Tafuto is not going to give up lightly. Like, Tafuto is an absolute warrior, and she's got so much competitive experience. She will know how to close this out. But you know what? So does Linda Meyer. And sometimes, arguably, it's easier to chase than be chased. You know, she'll know what she needs to do. As Megan Jacoby reaches the wall balls. 6 kilograms for the ladies. 100 wall balls to a 2.7 meter target. No one is catching this woman. Lovely depth from the world record holder. 58.58, Megan Jacoby. She knows what's needed to go sub 60. She's done it before, and she might be on to do it again.
Megan's looking incredibly strong there on the wall balls, but if we look at that chase for third spot with Vivian is currently in third place, but Linda is closing the gap. And if we look at the most recent runs, on run 7 alone, Linda clawed back 20 seconds on that run. The previous run, she clawed back 11 seconds. So she's going to be confident. Well, I think there's a 20-second gap going into that final run, but Linda will be feeling good on the runs, and she knows she's clawing back like 20 seconds per run. You could easily catch up at the wall balls and literally have a neck and neck, having a wall ball off for a place at the World Championships.
It must be a surreal experience being the only woman at the wall ball station. She's out there completely isolated, but she's not dropping that ball. Megan Jacoby, your leader. And look who joins her. It's Lauren Weeks, side by side. The two American greats in women's HYROX, fighting it out on the final station of this absolutely grueling race. There's little Weeks will be able to do now. Megan Jacoby, an unstoppable freight train ever since she left the station. In fact, actually, Jacoby played this so well because she didn't get sucked in those opening exchanges through the run or the ski erg. She didn't necessarily bide her time, but like we mentioned, she certainly did run her own race.
Yeah, she did. Like you say, Lauren opened up. It was only a very small gap, really, in those early stages, but even I think it was 6 seconds on the first run, for example. It's easy. 6 seconds over a kilometre can be a significant difference to how you feel for the rest of the race. So she trusted herself and she didn't get drawn into it. And clearly she's been strong throughout this race. And there she goes.
Megan Jacoby, your 2024 Major Chicago champion. What an unbelievable performance from the world's best. That was so unbelievably impressive. Oh, but the battle for third is on. Tafuto versus Meyer. They reached the wall balls, Greg, at exactly the same time. This is what racing's all about.
This is what we want to see. This is exactly what we want to see. A space for the World Championships up for grabs at the wall balls, coming in together. Who's going to break first? You're next to each other. You know how good you're feeling. This is where you really need to dig deep. HYROX is about digging deep. It's a mental game at this point. You know, they both can do these wall balls. They've both done them 1,000 times before. But how big are you willing to dig deep for that place at the World Championships?
And look, these girls are digging deep. I've not seen Weeks rest once. And so far, nor Maya or Tafuto. So much riding. A ticket to the World Championships in Nice in June. Do it now and your entire season can be based around performing at that one race. I mean, you can go to the majors, there's prize money up for grabs, but what a weight off your shoulders if you know that you are sorted for the big one of the season.
You're right, that's an absolutely huge advantage to know that you need to peak for a race in June and not have to race and not have to get a time and not have to compete in the majors, not have to podium for the rest of the season.
Camila Massa and Beck Mason came in neck and neck, but that is Lauren Weeks, your runner-up here in Chicago. Always so impressive watching these two women do their thing. It's never not a battle between two of the best in the sport.
We've not seen Vivian or Linda break yet. Who's going to be the first to break? And maybe it'll be neither of them, in which case it comes down to how quickly they're squatting, how quickly they're throwing the ball, how quickly can they cycle it. You know, sometimes that's literally what it comes down to at this level when they can all go unbroken. It's incredible to see.
I mean, just visually, I would say Vivian Tafuto has the edge there. She's just got a slightly quicker cycle speed, and she's not holding out in the bottom at all. You can see Maya is really driving with her legs, though. That certainly helps with the height. It minimizes the risk of no reps. I mean, I'm double guessing myself here. It really could be anyone, so that's kind of the beauty of it. You see Massa there opting for a slightly wider foot stance. That's interesting because it doesn't quite allow the depth of the other girls. That could catch her out.
You're right, she's moving quickly, but I think if we were just talking about cycle speed there, I think Linda's edging it right now. Vivian's broken. Vivian's broken. That's going to encourage Linda. Look, Linda's still going, and she's going to know that she's got it now. She's got the edge. If she can just keep going, keep moving, she's got a spot at the World Championships.
The smile that you just saw on Linda Meyer's face there. And it's Linda Meyer! Gets her ticket to Worlds! Third place for the German. I'm not sure we saw that coming. She built through the entire race, quite literally. At one point, I think she was in 8th, and she has just chipped away periodically over the last hour, and look at where it's got her. A bronze medal here in Chicago. As Tafuto also crashes over. An absolutely admirable effort, and we know how brutal it is to be caught on the final station. Honestly, it's so not easy. She's done such a fabulous job across the race. She held 3rd for the majority. But these girls, you know, they're impressive. They're athletes. They know how to win.
Yeah, we talked so much, you know, today just purely about pacing your HYROX. I think if we look at Linda, I think she's extracted every last bit of potential from herself today. She has paced that to perfection. We saw the split times dropping. We saw the gap dropping between her and Vivian. She was reeling her in all the time. And there goes Camilla crossing the line in 5th spot. Really impressive performance from Camilla in a time of... We're not sure yet.
How good's your eyesight, Greg? Because that's a very small screen. No, very impressive. Still, 5 athletes on the wall station as the 6th joins them. We've got Viola Oberlander, Alina Villeneuve. Viola Oberlander, she is in. A big race for Oberlander. She occupied 3rd for a short amount of time, and that is a great result for Alina Villeneuve. Absolutely awesome. For someone who's still so new to racing, her second season upcoming, and closing out this in the top 6. Tara Jackson, a Deca world record holder. She closes out her race. I'm not going to lie, I'm not even sure she looks particularly tired. It's a huge amount of work over a very short space of time. And you look at these ladies, and I mean, I'm not sure we say they make it look easy, but if the average person tried to race at the pace that we've just witnessed, you know, the likelihood is you would implode.
Yeah, it's like we keep saying, you have to dig very deep in a HYROX, and then you have to finish off with 100 wall balls. It's incredibly tough, and they're just chipping away at it, looking very, very strong still. I think this is Zara Piergiani, Kate Davey, and Maria Fessick, I think we're looking at here, all looking really good. And there goes Zara crossing the line there. So to reiterate, the top 3 finishers today have qualified for the World Championships. What's more, the top finisher has qualified themselves for all the majors next year. And the top 3 have also qualified themselves for the remaining majors next year.
Let's take a little reminder of who has now qualified. Ryan Kent, the winner here in Chicago in the men's race. Rylan Shadegg in second, and Alexander Ronchevich. Those are your 3 with tickets to the World Champs in Nice in June. And of course, all remaining major races for the season, pending of course them accepting their invites, but really, really exciting to see a rookie amongst those names. Of course, we know what Ryan Kent can do. We know what Alex Ronchevich can do, but oh my God, Rylan Shadegg, that is so exciting for the sport, having someone youthful, exciting, and able to hang with the big boys coming straight in.
Yeah, and someone that it doesn't feel, at least to me, like he's focused on the HYROX until, and there's Kate Davey crossing the line there. It's Kate's first appearance on the grid, really impressive performance, a huge amount she'll gain from this experience. But yeah, going back to Rylan, like I said, it doesn't feel like he's been trying to peak for this race or the race that qualified him for it. If he does choose to focus on it now, his potential it could be really good to see.
Rylan does what he wants. Rylan wanted to be in Greece last week, doing well at Trifecta, which he did. He came second. He then fancied a little trip to Istanbul. He then fancied a trip to Switzerland. And now he's here taking his ticket at World Champs. Utterly amazing. Daniela Couto there, finishing off her warbles. The Portuguese late call-up. But the women who we will see in France, Megan Jacobi, Lauren Weeks, and Linda Meyer. This is so exciting. We already know that should they qualified, Megan and Lauren were both going to be racing every single major this season, but now the opportunity exists for Linda Meyer as well. As the last of the field chip away at the final wall balls. Alandra Greenlee just behind Daniela Couto there. That's not something we expected, Greg, but you know, like we said at the start of the show, she's a full-time doctor. Her priorities maybe aren't always going to be racing. Great to see her out there and getting it all completed alongside young rookie from Portugal. And the cheer crew is out in force. That's what you need at these moments, isn't it? A big group of girls standing around you saying, you do not put that wall down. And I've not seen them break yet. Zara Piergiani there, helping Daniela Couto to the finish. So let's take a look at the results. Jacoby, of course, your champion from here in Chicago. But Camila Massa finishing top 5 and Vivian Tafuto 4th. So much to look forward to from this middle of the pack. Rebecca Mason equals her result from World Championships. I mean, that's a nice looking leaderboard of ladies as we get ready for Stockholm, Greg. The season is underway.
The season is well underway. We've seen 2 fantastic races. Incredible performances from athletes this early in the season. Now they've qualified for the World Championship. I know many of them are expecting to perform in the remaining majors of the season. You know, we talk about Megan and Lauren a lot today. It's very little separated them today. It would be very hard to call for future races if anything's going to separate them. So yeah, fantastic opening races of the season.
So after a 6-month hiatus since the 23 World Championships, the Elite 15 season is very much back in business. Whilst local triumphs obviously will continue this afternoon here on Navy Pier in the community racing, our gaze now turns to the global stage. 6 tickets to Worlds have been secured, and they've set the tone for a grand spectacle in June. But the journey doesn't end here. 3 more majors on the horizon, 2 last chance qualifiers await. So, we'll see you in Stockholm. From Greg Williams, myself, huge congratulations to all of the athletes and everyone who's booked their ticket to Nice. Goodbye, but only for a little bit.